Chapter 549. Pursuit. Bright silver light poured down from the distant sky, passing through the messy and complicated buildings and casting shadows on the ground, like pieces of breathtaking black pawns, as if they were emitting some kind of magic. The darkness covered the light, and at the same time, it also exposed the other side of people's hearts that they rarely showed. Under the cover of the night, the sky above Sin City emitted an inexplicable killing intent. There was also a faint smell of blood. It was not as peaceful as it was during the day. Under the night sky, Sin City gradually revealed its original appearance. In the darkness, a black shadow swept past quickly, shuttling through the shadows cast by the city. Behind the black shadow, there were several figures following it, as if they were chasing after the one in front. Among the few figures behind, one of them was the fastest. He was constantly closing the distance between him and the black shadow in front. Sensing that the distance was constantly closing, Qin Feng's face was gloomy. At this time, he had already pushed his speed to the limit, but he was carrying an unconscious exploding flower, so his speed was greatly restricted. On the other hand, the few people chasing after him did not have much of a restriction, especially the one who was closing the distance. Qin Feng also knew who made the move. The one in the lead was Zhou Ji, who he saw during the day. As for the other three, one of them was Wu Sheng, and the other two should be their accomplices. He knew that these people would not let this matter go so easily, but he still overestimated their methods. He did not expect that they would be able to use such a despicable method. Although the fight with Zhou Ji was short, Qin Feng could sense that Zhou Ji's strength was in the divine realm. If he really went all out, he was not without the ability to fight. But now that exploding flower was unconscious, not only could she not help him share the burden, but he also had to spare some energy to take care of her. Under such circumstances, he could not fight with these people at all. He could only avoid them. Most importantly, they did not seem to have discovered exploding flower's identity. This was the most important thing, and it must not be exposed. Qin Feng ran all the way, but he was not familiar with the terrain here at all. On the other hand, Zhou Ji and the others had always lived here and were quite familiar with this place. If this continued, it was inevitable that they would be caught up. I have to think of a way to shake them off. Qin Feng's complexion kept changing as he tried to think of a way to retreat. At the back, Zhou Ji looked at the gradually shrinking distance between them. A cold smile hung on his face. Originally, he had a 90% chance of succeeding. However, he didn't expect that there would be a flaw in his plan. Moreover, he had suffered such a huge loss in the most humiliating way. If it wasn't for their secret plan, how would he, Zhou Ji, be able to maintain his foothold in Sin City? The humiliation in his heart made the killing intent on Zhou Ji's face thicken. He lightly stomped his feet, and dark green spirit power poured into his legs. With the support of spirit power, his speed suddenly increased a lot. The distance between them, which was not far to begin with, was instantly shortened by a lot. Looking at the approaching figure, Zhou Hen's voice, which was filled with ice-cold killing intent, passed through the darkness and entered Qin Feng's ears. "Little bastard, you can't escape today. Prepare to die." Feeling the rapidly approaching figure, Qin Feng's complexion changed. Without turning his head, he waved his hand, and a powerful force shot out. Feeling the pressure coming from the darkness, Zhou Ji sneered. He also waved his sleeve, and a green light flashed, instantly dispersing the force. "I want to see what other tricks you have." With a sneer, Zhou Ji's speed increased again. Every time he attacked, Qin Feng would be in a sorry state. However, he was still unable to truly injure him. This infuriated him greatly. However, aside from feeling annoyed, he was also shocked. He had the strength of a divine realm expert. Although he did not want to draw attention to himself, which was why he had suppressed his strength, he was still extremely fast. He had almost left Wu Sheng and the others in the dust. However, the person in front of him was carrying another person, so his speed was limited. He actually couldn't catch up. Under this kind of pursuit, everyone's stamina was greatly depleted. Although Qin Feng's body was stronger than the others, he was still carrying the explosive flower. Therefore, his stamina consumption was no less than Zhou Ji and the others. The speed of the few people slowed down, and the expressions of the people on both sides are different. On Qin Feng's side, his expression was ugly. The stalemate wasn't good for him. They weren't familiar with the terrain, so it was only a matter of time before they were surrounded. On the other hand, Zhou Ji and the others were overjoyed. Although they couldn't win in terms of speed, their stamina consumption was much lower than the other parties. Even if they continued like this, they would be able to exhaust the other party. Qin Feng knew what they were planning to do. Hence, he became even more anxious. However, no matter how much he increased his speed, he was still unable to shake off those people. Instead, under the repeated outbursts, his physical strength decreased even faster. However, sometimes good things don't come in pairs, and bad things don't come alone. Just when his stamina was at its worst, Qin Feng, who had no sense of direction, plunged into a dark alley. Moreover, it was a dead end. There was no way forward. Hee, why don't you keep running? Zhou Ji, who had caught up from behind, was stunned when he saw Qin Feng stop. Then he saw that it was a dead end and immediately sneered. Soon, Wu Sheng and the others also caught up. They scattered at the exit of the alley and stared at the figure with a sinister smile. Qin Feng sighed in his heart. He gently put down the unconscious big popcorn and wrapped her in a black robe. Then, he turned around and stared at Zhou Ji and the others indifferently. With the strength of a half-step peak, you can't even catch up with me. Kid, you should have a high-leveled agility combat skill on you, right? Zhou Ji looked at Qin Feng with a covetous look in his eyes. If you take the initiative to hand it over, I can give you a dignified death. Qin Feng glanced at him and ignored him. Kid, did you hear that? Zhou De Ge has spoken. Hurry up and hand it over. Wu Sheng also shouted. He stared at Qin Feng with eyes full of killing intent. He was so embarrassed in front of him during the day. Now, he must make him pay back tenfold. Qin Feng looked indifferently at Wu Sheng, who was pretending to be powerful and still didn't say anything. Not going to hand it over. Looking at the silent Qin Feng, Zhou Ji chuckled. It wasn't that there weren't any agility combat skills, but they were relatively unpopular and rare. Moreover, most of the skills on the market were very low-leveled. Some high-leveled agility combat skills were rare. In Zhou Ji's view, with the strength of a half-step peak, to be able to display a speed that even he couldn't catch up to, it must be a high-level combat skill. Chapter 550. A brief confrontation to Zhou Hen. The thought of increasing his ranking on the list was a huge temptation. In fact, in his heart, it was far more important than Zhou Mo's. After all, Zhou Mo was only used to curry favor with Su Yan. It wasn't as important as increasing his own strength. However, Zhou Hen did not know that the so-called movement-type combat skills were all his imagination. The reason why Qin Feng could move so quickly was all because of the tyrannical strength of his physical body. His explosive power and endurance far surpassed that of ordinary people. That was why he could move so quickly. If you don't give it to me, then I can only take it myself. Wait until I cripple you and destroy your sea of qi. Let's see what secrets you can't keep from me. Zhou Ji sneered and decisively made his move. Dark green spiritual energy burst out and condensed into a huge snake head. The snake head extended its tongue and looked quite ferocious. Furious Python Devourer. Zhou Ji didn't hold back when he made his move. He had a faint feeling that this brat was somewhat unusual. In order to prevent any accidents from happening, he had to use his strongest method to seriously injure or even kill him in the shortest amount of time. Open the gate of life. Facing Zhou Ji's powerful attack, Qin Feng didn't dare to be careless and directly opened the gate of life. The spiritual energy in his body quickly circulated and he threw out a punch. Ferocious spiritual energy and physical strength swept out and violently collided with the dark green snake head. Airwaves spread out and left deep marks on the walls on both sides. The green light exploded with spiritual energy and slowly dissipated. When the light dissipated, Zhou Ji looked at the scene and his pupils suddenly shrank. Under his attack, Qin Feng, who was only a half-step peak, was actually unscathed. He didn't even take a step back. Clearly, He didn't have the upper hand. Although he didn't use his full strength, he was still a member of the ambitious and ruthless person list. He had a record of killing experts in the same realm. Therefore, even an ordinary divine realm expert would have to retreat in a sorry state when facing his attack. However, his opponent didn't move at all. Zhouji's expression turned serious. It seemed that he had underestimated this young man's strength. However, he did not panic. After all, those who could be ranked on the ambitious person list had their hands stained with blood. Every time they were stained with blood, it represented a shocking achievement. Over the years, many experts in the same realm had died at his hands. Even if they were in the same realm, there were more than one or two of them. No matter how powerful the young man in front of him was, there was still a large gap between them. And this gap was an insurmountable gap. When Wu Sheng and the others saw this scene, they felt a chill in their hearts. They were very clear about Zhouji's strength. Originally, it was a one-sided attack, but now it was actually evenly matched. At the same time, he was shocked. Just as Zhouji had said, these two people were characters that he could not afford to offend. Even the weak woman could send him flying with a slap. This showed how powerful this man was. Taking Zhouji's attack head-on without being defeated, even with the strength of a half-step peak, one could see how terrifying he was. Fighting against those above, and at this juncture, it was simply shocking. Since ancient times, how many people had been able to go against the Nine Heavens realm? To have such strength at such a young age, his talent must be abnormal. Fortunately, he did not impulsively attack him at that time. Otherwise, he might not be able to stand here now. However, although he was shocked by Qin Feng's strength, he was not worried. After all, they still had Zhouji, who was ranked 8th on the heroes leaderboard, on their side. He was a bona fide divine realm expert, and Wu Sheng did not believe that this young man had the ability to fight against Zhouji. After all, the heroes on the list of formidable heroes all had the battle record of killing experts of the same level. Zhouji had killed more than one or two people. His strength was terrifying. He does have some tricks up his sleeve. Zhou Hen's gaze was deep as he stared at Qin Feng. He smiled and said, "It might be somewhat troublesome to kill you. However, I can clearly tell you that the one who will fall in the end will definitely be you. I'll give you a choice now. 1. Hand over the things you have and leave that woman behind, and you can leave safely. 2. I'll pay a price and kill you, then take those things. No matter which one you choose, these two things will end up in my hands in the end. It's just that one is life and the other is death," Zhouji said indifferently. Qin Feng stared at Zhao Tian expressionlessly and said coldly, "Don't force me to kill you." "Kill us?" Zhouji was stunned, then sneered. "Do you have the strength?" "You can try," Qin Feng said indifferently. "I've killed more than one Heaven Realm cultivator." Zhou Hen's eyes narrowed as an ominous glint flickered within them. A ferocious aura that belonged to an ambitious and ruthless individual slowly spread. He shook his head and sighed. "Originally, I wanted to spare your life. However, since you are asking for death, I will fulfill your wish." As he finished speaking, an extremely fierce and violent aura burst out from Zhouji's body. This aura carried a faint smell of blood. Only someone whose hands were truly stained with blood could have such a bloody smell. He didn't doubt the truth of Qin Feng's words. A person who could remain so calm at this juncture definitely had such strength. This also intensified the killing intent and greed in his heart. To be able to go against a 9th Heaven Realm cultivator, he must have an extremely high-grade battle skill or technique. Those with outstanding talent could go against ordinary cultivators, but going against a 9th Heaven Realm cultivator wasn't something that could be made up for by talent alone. There had to be some kind of heaven-shaking method that could fill the huge gap between the two. Such a method was naturally something he coveted. Looking at Zhouji, who wasn't holding back, Qin Feng's expression gradually became dignified. He could sense a dangerous aura from the former's body. This person was able to occupy the 8th position on the ambitious person list, so he did indeed have some skill. Just from his aura alone, Qin Feng estimated that he was close to touching the barrier of the 2nd Heaven Realm. Compared to Chen Wujiu and Xue Qing, who he had used all his strength to kill before, this person was even stronger. However, Qin Feng wasn't afraid. He had come into contact with more powerful masters in the past, so a mere peak First Heaven Realm cultivator like Zhou Ji wasn't enough to make him fear him. It was just that if he wanted to deal with this person, he would have to pay a price he didn't want to pay. In Sin City, where danger lurked in every corner, the law of the jungle was the law of survival. Therefore, it was important to maintain one's peak combat strength. If possible, one should try their best not to get injured. However, the current situation was no longer something that Qin Feng could decide. Qin Feng didn't want to make an enemy of such a person, but now that he had no choice, he could only try his best to kill him. Since that's the case, there's no need to hold back. Qin Feng whispered softly, but just as he was about to open the second gate of the heavenly cycle life and death scripture to quickly finish off his opponent, a shout suddenly came from behind Zhou Ji and the others. Chapter 551. Scared awful light voice with a hint of anger suddenly rang out in the alley, causing Zhou Ji, Wu Sheng, and the others' expressions to change slightly. Zhou Ji frowned and turned to look at the beautiful figure under the moonlight. He said in a deep voice, "Rinqier, it's best that you don't interfere in our matters. As long as it's something that persecutes women, I, Rinqier, must interfere." Rinqier said coldly. Hearing that, Zhou Ji's frown deepened. He was silent for a while, then said, "Rinqier, don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have that woman's protection. If I want to kill you, it's easy." Rinqier snorted and said disdainfully, "Do you dare to kill me? Have you forgotten the lesson from back then? Do you need me to remind you?" Zhou Ji's expression changed. He stared at the beautiful figure with a gloomy gaze and fell silent. Back then, he also had thoughts about Rinqier, who was rumored to be a human medicine. He had also taken action, but in the end, he did not succeed. Instead, he was hunted down by the woman from the Guanghan Palace. That was the darkest period of his life, where he had lost all face. He had tried his best, but that woman was more terrifying than he had imagined. At that time, he had teamed up with the 5th, 7th, and 9th on the ambitious person list, but they had still been defeated by her. If Suyi had not appeared in the end and took out something that the woman needed to stop her, he might have died in that battle. It was also because of that battle that people knew how important Guanghan Palace was to Rinqier. Since then, no one dared to have any thoughts about Rinqier. Some time ago, when he heard that Rinqier had gone missing, this woman had not only caused trouble for a few large forces, she had also confronted Suyi. He thought that the woman was just looking for an excuse to deal with others, so he did not pay much attention to it. Zhou Ji was silent for a while. He occasionally glanced at Rinqier, his eyes flashing with an indescribable light. He did not say anything. No one knew what he was thinking. With his silence, Wu Sheng and the others naturally did not dare to interrupt. They could only stand there awkwardly. They could not compare to Su Yi and Zhou Ji. The two of them were real figures on the ambitious person list. If it was not a big matter, the woman in the Guanghan Palace would at least give them some face. However, he was different. If he really angered that woman, she could just casually move her little finger and destroy him. And this time, it was indeed his side that was unreasonable. He was afraid that Su Yin wouldn't be able to directly come forward to protect him. At this moment, Wu Sheng and the others were eagerly hoping that Zhou Hen would give in and put in a few good words. Otherwise, if he really angered the one inside the Guanghan Palace, Zhou Hen might be fine, but the three of them would be finished. The three of them looked at Zhou Hen with pleading eyes, hoping that he would not fight to the death with Rinqier. When he received the Guanghan Palace of Guanghan Palace of Guanghan Palace of Guanghan Palace, Zhou Ji frowned even more. Zhou Ji, this place is close to the Guanghan Palace. There are many sisters nearby. As long as I shout, they will immediately appear. However, if you stop now and leave this place, I will not expose this matter. Rinqier looked at the silent Zhou Ji and said in a deep voice. Hearing this, Wu Sheng and the others were overjoyed. As long as the woman in the Guanghan Palace of Guanghan Palace did not know, everything would be fine. They looked at Zhou Ji with even more urgency. If it were not for the fact that he was ranked 8th on the ambitious person list and was very strong, they would have answered for him. Zhouji's face was uncertain. His eyes flickered for a moment. After a while, his eyes suddenly focused and a fierce light flashed. He stared at Rinshi and said, "You only care about the woman who is being persecuted. Today, I will give face to the woman, but I will take this man away. You have no right to interfere. You can't let go. Be stubborn until the end. He is testing your strength." Rinshi thought for a while. Just as she was about to speak, she vaguely heard such a voice. She glanced at Qin Feng and said, "Since I am involved in this matter, I will naturally take care of it to the end. If you don't leave, I will immediately ask the sisters in the Guanghan Palace to go back and inform Sister Yu. Don't. Miss Run, it is our honor to give face to the Guanghan Palace." Before Zhou Ji could speak, Wu Sheng spoke first. He was really afraid. After all, his status was not as high as Zhou Ji's. There was no need to offend the Guanghan Palace. It would be best if he could resolve this matter. Zhou Ji's frown deepened. He stared at the indifferent Rinshi. After a while, he snorted coldly and left without saying anything. Wu Sheng and the other two laughed awkwardly and left dejectedly. It was not until they had completely disappeared into the darkness that Rinshi breathed a sigh of relief. She patted her chest and walked towards Qin Feng. Puzzled, she asked, "Why did you say that? Didn't you see that Zhou Ji had the intention to kill me?" "It is precisely because of this that you have to let him know that you are very confident and not afraid that he will kill you," Qin Feng said. From the conversation between the two, he could tell that Zhou Ji was very afraid of the woman in the Guanghan Palace. The reason why he did not leave was that he could hear the guilty conscience in Rinshi voice at the beginning. So, he deliberately took a step back to test Rinshi bottom line. If Rinshi had really acted like this at that time, it could only mean that she was not confident enough. Qin Feng believed that Zhou Ji would have immediately subdued Rinshi and then attacked him. The people on the ambitious person list were all people who fought their way up. There were not many fools who would be stunned by a few words. So, she had to be tough to the end. Only in this way could Zhou Ji retreat. As for whether Zhou Ji completely believed what Rinshi said, Qin Feng did not know. However, without 100% certainty that the news would not spread, Zhou Ji would not gamble with his life. The more vicious a person was, the more he or she cherished his or her life. Rinshi thought for a moment and quickly came back to her senses. She immediately quivered. She had almost been fooled by Zhou Ji. What a despicable guy. She curled her lips and asked, "How did you provoke him?" Judging for his tone just now, it shouldn't be because of the green-scaled monster. It was just an accidental conflict. Qin Feng shook his head and said, "Why are you here? I'm looking for you. Now you're a big celebrity here." Rinshi looked Qin Feng up and down and nodded. "It seems that you are quite capable. There are so many people surrounding you, but you are still fine. The situation outside is very tense. Why don't you come to the Guanghan Palace to lie low for a while?" Qin Feng's eyes darkened. He secretly wondered if Rinshi was reliable. He could not be blamed for gauging the heart of a gentleman with his own mien. He had seen with his own eyes that everyone was chasing after the popcorn. It was hard to guarantee that the Guanghan Palace did not have such intentions. He had to be careful now. Otherwise, he and the popcorn would be doomed eternally if he was not careful. Don't worry. The Guanghan Palace has always been benevolent and righteous. We take it as our duty to rob the rich and help the poor. We are not interested in fighting beasts. Rinshi seemed to know Qin Feng's worries and smiled. Qin Feng was stunned. He immediately laughed and said, "Sorry, for my safety, I have to think more. It's okay. This is human nature." Rinshi was very open-minded. She nodded and said, "In a place like this, it is necessary to be cautious." Chapter 552. Entering the Guanghan Palace. Thank you. Qin Feng nodded. He had already planned to do so, but the appearance of Yi Wu and Zhou Mo had disrupted his plans. Since the four of them were unable to leave the city, he might as well stick to his original plan. As for Yi Wu and Zhou Mo, Qin Feng did not plan to contact them. His situation was not good, and there was no need to involve them. 10 minutes later, the three of them arrived at a huge courtyard. The courtyard was quite large, and it was obvious that the Guanghan Palace had a high status in Sin City. In the courtyard, there were stone pavilions, rockeries, and ponds. Everything was available, and there were pavilions, birdsong, and fragrant flowers. It was a quiet and unique place. It was very suitable for people who liked peace and quiet. Ren Shi, led Qin Feng and Yi Wu to the back of the courtyard. There were rows of pavilions, and the empty space outside was filled with freshly washed clothes and bedsheets. This should be the place where the people of the Guanghan Palace lived. Who dares to barge into the Guanghan Palace? Suddenly, a cautious voice rang out, and a series of footsteps could be heard. A few beautiful women quickly walked over. However, when they saw Ren Shi, the hostility on their faces disappeared. One of the women smiled and said, "Big sister Run, it's you." After seeing Ren Shi, the few women also put away their swords and happily surrounded her. Ren Shi also smiled and greeted the women. "Hey, big sister Run, who are these two people?" One of the women asked curiously when she saw Qin Feng, who was holding a big flower. The others were also puzzled, but this time there was no hostility. They trusted Ren Shi and did not scold Qin Feng because he was a man. These two people have just arrived in Sin City. They were bullied by Zhou Ji, Wu Sheng, and the others, so I helped them. Ren Shi explained with a smile. Zhou Ji? Upon hearing this name, the expressions of the few ladies changed slightly. They hurriedly went up and circled around Ren Shi. With a worried look, they asked, "Sister Run, did Zhou Ji do anything to you?" They all knew that Zhou Ji was a powerful figure who ranked 8th on the list of formidable men. "Look at me. Do I look like I have something to do?" Ren Shi opened her arms and twirled in front of them, smiling. Seeing that nothing was amiss, the women heaved a sigh of relief. Someone said, "It seems that Zhou Ji is quite sensible. He doesn't dare to touch the people of our Guanghan Palace." Of course, with elder sister Yu around, who would dare to have any ideas about our elder sister in? A woman said with a smile. When she mentioned Sister Yu, her eyes were filled with deep admiration and adoration. Looking at the sisters of number 1 middle school, Ren Shi smiled and shook her head. She said, "Zhou Ji doesn't dare to make a move just because of elder sister Yu." At this point, she suddenly paused and glanced at Qin Feng behind her. She smiled and said, "He didn't have the confidence to defeat this young man, so he chose to leave in the end. Otherwise, he would definitely kill me to silence me." As soon as Ren Shi finished speaking, there was an uproar. The few ladies looked at Qin Feng in disbelief. This young man who looked younger than them could defeat the famous formidable man Zhou Ji? Don't underestimate him. Looking at the expressions of the few ladies, Ren Shi knew that they were suspicious. She chuckled and said, "At that time, he took a full blow from Zhou Ji. Not only did he retreat unscathed, but he also repelled Zhou Ji. Otherwise, how could Zhou Ji retreat so easily?" The girls looked at Qin Feng doubtfully. Their eyes were wide open, and there was a strong sense of curiosity in their eyes. Being stared at by so many ladies, Qin Feng was also quite embarrassed. He smiled at the few of them. He didn't know why Ren Shi was talking nonsense to elevate him. "Hey, that's enough. Don't gather here. Go back and rest." Ren Shi waved at the few of them and said, "I know that men are not allowed to enter the Guanghan Palace. When elder sister Yu comes back, I will personally explain to her." Since she had spoken, the few ladies naturally didn't dare to disobey. They all walked away, but the whispers were still heard from time to time. Hearing the surprised and puzzled voices, Ren Shi looked back at Qin Feng and said with a smile, "It seems that you are going to become a celebrity in the Guanghan Palace. If you didn't exaggerate, it wouldn't be like this." Qin Feng smiled helplessly and said, "It can't be helped. The Guanghan Palace has a rule that men are not allowed to enter. If I didn't make you sound more powerful, I'm afraid that some of the sisters won't agree to let you stay here." Ren Shi shrugged her shoulders cutely and said with a smile, Moreover, I didn't exaggerate when I was able to turn the blood-refining sect into such a state and kill Xueqing. Hearing this, Qin Feng could only smile bitterly. After bidding farewell to the ladies, Ren Qi led Qin Feng and Xueqing to a room at the back and pushed the door open. Put down the exploding flower first. Looking at the exploding flower's face, Ren Qi patted her face for a while and then heaved a sigh of relief. She smiled at Qin Feng and said she should have just inhaled too much knockout powder and fainted. There isn't much of a problem. Hearing this, Qin Feng heaved a sigh of relief. He came to the table and sat down. He poured a glass of water and gulped it down. After tonight's torment, even he felt a little tired. Looking at Qin Feng, who was sitting there with his eyes narrowed, no one knew what he was thinking. Ren Qi looked at him for a while and walked over. After a little hesitation, she asked softly, "What are your plans next? Let's wait for the wind to blow over and then find an opportunity to leave here." After a moment of silence, Qin Feng said softly. Ren Qi nodded and said, "There is no other way. It seems that this is the only way. But I suddenly thought of a way that may be foolproof." After a moment of silence, Ren Qi suddenly said. Qin Feng was stunned and asked, "What way?" Ren Qi looked at the exploding flower on the bed and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Although her body is a spirit beast, she usually looks like a girl. If she joins the Guanghan Palace, I think no one will dare to have any thoughts about her." After she said this, she could clearly feel that Qin Feng's aura suddenly changed and some coldness seeped out. Seeing this, she quickly waved her hand and said, "I don't mean anything else. It's just a suggestion. Even if she joins the Guanghan Palace, we won't restrict her freedom." Narrowing his eyes slightly, Qin Feng stared at Ren Qi, and did not say anything. "I really don't mean anything else. Just pretend that I didn't say anything. In short, we won't have any thoughts about her." Ren Qi was silent for a while and said, "But I want to remind you that before leaving Sin City, it will be very dangerous for her to follow you." Staring at her for a while, Qin Feng said, "She is very powerful and is a rare help to any force." Chapter 553. Third on the ambitious person, ranking Qin Feng nodded and was silent for a moment. He looked at the big explosion of flowers and said softly, "If you guys purely have this idea, I won't stop you. As for whether she is willing to stay here or not, I won't interfere." Ren Qi's suggestion made Qin Feng's heart skip a beat. This was indeed a win-win situation for Big Flower Explosion. With Guanghan Palace's influence in Sin City, no one would dare to make a move against her. "As long as you agree, I don't think she'll reject. After all, we used to be good cellmates." Ren Qi smiled. After a pause, Ren Qi's face suddenly flashed with hesitation. Qin Feng saw this and asked, "Is there anything else?" Ren Qi hesitated for a while and then said slowly, "Although you saved me, I know Sister Yu's character. She can at most let you stay here to avoid the limelight for a few days. She will only decide according to her own time, not according to your situation. So no matter what happens outside, as long as she feels that the time is up, she will definitely chase you out. I'll let the explosion stay here because of this consideration. After all, once you're outside, the situation will be very dangerous." Hearing this, Qin Feng fell silent. If that was the case, he had to leave the explosion here. However, thinking about it from the perspective of the big picture, he felt that this might be Guanghan Palace's plan. They purposely gave him a place to stay and then kicked him out based on the rules. When the time came, the explosion would still fall on Guanghan Palace. Qin Feng didn't know, but he didn't dare to make a conclusion. As for whether Guanghan Palace was reliable, it seemed that he would only know after he came into contact with that woman. If you leave Guanghan Palace, you have to be careful of Zhou Ji. He's not a magnanimous person. We made him suffer a great loss today. I'm fine because he won't dare to openly provoke Guanghan Palace, but you're different. He will definitely find a chance to take revenge on you." Ren Qi, who didn't know what Qin Feng was thinking, said, "Oh." Qin Feng replied indifferently. He was still thinking about the Guanghan Palace. Looking at his attitude, Rinchier couldn't help but be slightly stunned. This young man didn't seem to care about this matter at all. Did he have the confidence to deal with Zhou Ji, or did he not understand the power situation here? However, she was leaning towards the latter. Zhou Ji is not an ordinary person, and he is not a Lone Ranger. Rinchier seriously reminded, the vice sect master of the blood-refining sect cannot be compared to him. Raising his eyebrows, Qin Feng looked at Rinchier, paused for a moment, and asked softly, "Can you tell me something about him?" Rinchier nodded and brushed her hair behind her ear. She asked softly, "Have you heard of the list of formidable men?" List of formidable men. When Qin Feng heard this, he was silent for a while and then nodded. He knew a little about this. Zhou Ji was one of the people on the list. Yes, Zhou Ji is ranked 8th, Rinchier said. Don't be fooled by his rank. Those who can make it to the top 20 on the list of formidable men are all extraordinary people. The 8th place has the strength of the peak of the divine realm. Qin Feng smiled. The list of formidable men was really valuable. Looking at his face, Rinchier knew what he was thinking. She shook her head helplessly and said, "Do you think the list of formidable men is just a joke? Those who can make it to the list are all fierce and fierce. Their fierce names are all made by killing. None of them didn't walk out of blood and bones. Any one of them is a real fierce person. Zhou Ji is ranked 8th on the list of formidable men, which is enough to prove his strength. I am indeed surprised that you can kill Xueqing, but I don't think you could defeat Zhou Ji. You should know that those who can make it to the list have killed people of the same level. Many of them have brilliant battle records. So don't think that you can really contend with him just because you took one of his attacks. There are no mediocre people on the list of formidable men. Zhou Ji's strength is absolutely terrifying. If he really goes crazy, I'm afraid that an ordinary 2 heaven realm will have to treat him seriously. The name of formidable men is not a joke. He didn't even use his full strength tonight, Rinchier said seriously. When he heard this, Qin Feng's face turned serious. This Zhou Ji is so powerful. The 9 heavenly realms were higher and higher each day. There was a huge gap between each heavenly realm. If Zhou Ji really had the strength to fight a 2 heaven realm, it would be really amazing. What's in it for me to lie to you? Rinchier raised her eyebrows and looked at Qin Feng. She curled her lips and said, I said this to let you know more about him. This person is not as simple as he looks. In other words, those who are in the top 10 of the list of formidable men are not simple people. I know that you're not simple either. Maybe you have the strength to fight a 2 heaven realm expert, but so does Zhou Ji. Some time ago, I heard that he had seriously injured an old expert who was about to step into the 2 heaven realm. In the end, if that person did not run away quickly, he would have died in Zhou Ji's hands. When he heard this, Qin Feng was silent. Hearing Rinchier's words, he really underestimated this Zhou Ji. Looking at the silent Qin Feng, Rinchier paused and said softly, Actually, this Zhou Ji is not the most troublesome person. The real troublesome person is that person. Qin Feng subconsciously clenched his fists in his sleeves. He could tell that Rinchier's tone had changed. When she was talking about Zhou Hen, although he had many tricks up his sleeve and was a powerful character, her tone was very calm. But when she mentioned that person, her tone clearly paused. Clearly, she was quite afraid. No, it should be a deep fear. This person is a cultivation genius of Sin City. It is said that before he broke through to the 9th heaven realm, he was besieged by a force that had 1 2 heaven realm and 2 first heaven realm masters. It is said that he had the opportunity to leave this place at that time, but he did not. Under the encirclement of that great force, he held on for 3 months. After 3 months, he broke through to the 9th heaven realm and wiped out that great force overnight. Qin Feng's heart trembled when he heard this. This person's experiences back then were even more dangerous compared to his current situation. However, he was still able to break through the adversity and even cleanse this power with blood. From this, one could see that this person was definitely an extraordinary character. Compared to this person, Zhou Ji is a child's play. However, there's one thing about this person that is extremely detestable. Speaking of this, Ren suddenly paused, and a look of disgust appeared on her face. This person's actions are strange and evil. His cultivation is biased towards the way of cultivation. He specializes in dual cultivation techniques and mainly uses women to cultivate. The more beautiful a woman is, the more likely she is to become his prey. If it weren't for, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to escape. Speaking of this, Ren Xian'er's pretty face was mixed with some fear. When Qin Feng heard this, his face became a little solemn. He paused and asked, "What is this person's ranking on the list of ambitious people?" Chapter 554. Second and third on the list, it's him. Qin Feng's heart sank. Now that he knew some information about the list of ruthless and ambitious man, he knew how powerful it was. It was quite amazing to be in the top 3 among the ruthless and ambitious men. That Zhou Hen was only ranked 8th. As for Su Yi, he was actually ranked in the top 3. From this, it could be seen how frightening his strength was. Most importantly, he had killed Su Ye's younger brother, so there was a grudge between them. Song Sangyan had told him about Su Yi, but he did not know as much as Ren Xian'er. In the city of sin, there is no lawlessness. Evil people run amok. Every single one of them has their own fame. Some busybodies have even created a ranking list among the many experts. That is the ambitious and ruthless person list. As for this Su Yi, he is ranked 3rd on that list. Ren Xian'er said. She flipped her palm, and a golden scroll appeared. She whispered to Qin Feng, "This is the list of ruthless and ambitious men. All the people who are on the list are recorded on it." Qin Feng glanced at the golden scroll and immediately received it. He spread it open, and instantly, the golden light was wanton. He looked at the light spots on the scroll in astonishment. These were actually copied using spiritual energy. Spiritual light flickered on the scroll. At the top, the spiritual light condensed into the words "list of ruthless and ambitious men." Then, the spiritual light flickered and words began to appear. Looking at the list, Qin Feng knew how powerful the ordinary names on the list of ruthless and ambitious men were. Every one of these people had outstanding achievements, and no one dared to look down on them. 20th on the list of ruthless and ambitious men, Su Chun, Half-Step Peak. Because he ate the flesh of the heavenly demon ape when he was young, he has a trace of the heavenly demon ape's blood in his body. His qi is as strong as a bull, and his strength is as strong as a mountain. 15th on the list of ruthless and ambitious men, Yuan Ruli, initial heavenly realm. He fought against a veteran expert and successfully escaped. 8th on the list of ruthless and ambitious men, Zhou Ji, peak heavenly realm. He once killed 3 heavenly realm experts. Row after row of words continued to appear. Each row represented a ferocious individual who was quite famous in Sin City. Their strength and battle records also caused Qin Feng to be slightly surprised. In terms of quality, the ferocious individuals on the ambitious person ranking all had one thing in common. They were undefeated within the same cultivation level and had the strength to fight against those above their cultivation level. As the words continued to appear, Qin Feng's expression became increasingly solemn. This was because the ranking had already reached the 5th place. Number 5 on the ambitious person leaderboard, Bu Jian. He is suspected to have entered the 2 heavens realm. People call him swordsman. His sword is so fast that he can walk in a rainstorm without getting wet. He had once fought against 3 powerhouses of the same level single-handedly, causing one of them to die, one to be injured, and one to flee. He even fought with the 2 heavens realm cultivators and forced them to retreat. To be able to achieve such a result, even when fighting 1 against 3, and to be able to force back 2 heaven realm experts, he is indeed powerful. Qin Feng could not help but sigh. Bo Jian was indeed valiant. He was indeed worthy of being ranked 5th. While Qin Feng was sighing, he looked at the words that appeared once again and squinted his eyes slightly. Number 4 on the ambitious person leaderboard, Zhu Xia, 2 heavens realm. He had once forced Bo Jian to retreat. Qin Feng's gaze turned solemn. Although the battle record of the fourth person was not clear, the simple sentence that he had forced Bo Jian to retreat was enough to explain everything. Since he had forced the fifth person to retreat, he deserved to be ranked fourth. As he continued to read, Qin Feng's expression turned solemn. Number 3 on the ambitious person leaderboard, Su Yi. His strength is unknown. The last time he fought was half a year ago. He killed a veteran expert at the third heaven realm and suppressed 3 peak experts at the second heaven realm by himself. He forced the other third heaven realm expert of the faction to turn the matter into a small one and give up on pursuing him. Qin Feng stared at that line of words and didn't move for a long time. This Su Yi was indeed fierce. Half a year ago, he already had the strength to kill a terrifying expert of the three heavens realm. Didn't that mean that the current him also had the strength of that level? This kind of person was indeed difficult to deal with. After all, the three heavens realm was too far away for him. He could not even fight against a two heavens realm expert, let alone a three heavens realm expert. However, he was a little puzzled. Why did the first 17 people have clear strength levels? But why was Su Ye's strength unknown? Has Su advanced to the three heavens realm? Qin Feng asked. That's why this person is terrifying. Rin Xie nodded her head and said softly, the reason why there is no clear indication of his strength is because no one has seen him fight in the past half a year. They only know that he had the strength to kill a three heavens realm expert half a year ago. With his talent, if he really advanced to the three heavens realm, he might be able to fight against a four heavens realm expert. Hearing this, Qin Feng's eyes narrowed. There was actually no one who knew of his true strength. This person was truly terrifying. After a long while, Qin Feng suppressed the sigh in his heart and looked at the two pieces of information at the bottom. At the same time, a strong sense of curiosity surged in his heart. He really wanted to know what kind of heaven's prides were the two people who were ranked ahead of Su and the others. Were they both at the three heavens realm? Spiritual light constantly flashed on the golden scroll. Then, the spiritual light turned into words and slowly appeared before Qin Feng's eyes. Second on the ambitious person list, Su Yu, heaven grade initial level spirit master. This time, the information that appeared was rather simple. However, when Qin Feng saw it, his heart could not help but tremble. The second on the ambitious person list was actually a spirit master like him. Moreover, she had reached the heaven grade. Those who could cultivate their spirit masters to the heaven grade were all seniors who had accumulated their spirit masters over a long period of time. No wonder she was able to suppress Su Yi. Qin Feng sighed in his heart. The battle prowess of a spirit master was originally slightly stronger than that of a cultivator of the same level, and the early stage of heaven stage corresponded to the first 3 levels of the 9 heavens realm. This Su Yu was able to suppress Su Yi. She indeed had her ability. This Su Yu should be the sister you mentioned. Qin Feng looked at Rin Xie and asked, someone who could make Zhou Ji so afraid must be ranked higher than him. Among the top 7, there were only 2 women. The second with a moon in her name was naturally the one from the Guanghan Palace. Rin Xie nodded. Her pretty face was filled with unconcealable admiration and worship. This is why Zhou Ji is so afraid of me. Compared to Sister Yu, he is just a nobody. Qin Feng nodded in agreement. Previously, he thought that Zhou Ji was already a powerful character. However, after looking at the ambitious person list, he realized that the truly powerful characters were all in the top 5. As for the 5th Bo Jian and the 4th Zhu Xia, although they didn't have a clear record of their special battle achievements in the second heaven realm, based on their battle achievements, Qin Feng believed that the 2 of them could dominate the second heaven realm. As for the 3rd Su Yi and the 2nd Su Yu, they were outstanding talents among the ambitious person list. Any one of them had the power to kill a third heaven's realm cultivator. Qin Feng suspected that Su had advanced to the third heaven's realm, and Su Yu had probably reached the peak of the heaven grade initial level. Chapter 555. Young Master Miao on the Golden Scroll. The spiritual light was still unceasingly flickering, and at this moment, Qin Feng's gaze was also fixed on the last ball of spiritual light. He wanted to see who exactly was the person in first place. As the spiritual light flickered, a line of small golden words quickly appeared. Number 1 on the ambitious person list. People call him Young Master Meow. Looking at the simple introduction, Qin Feng was stunned. What's going on? Is this the introduction of the number 1 on the ambitious person list? After looking at the scroll carefully, Qin Feng couldn't help but be a little stunned. He shot a puzzled look at Ren Qi'er, but the latter just spread out her hands with an expression that said, I don't know either. What's going on? No name, no strength, only a title. That's too sloppy, Qin Feng said gloomily. He wanted to see what kind of terrifying battle record the number 1 on the ambitious person list had. Who would have thought that he would be given such a simple introduction without even a name, strength, or battle record? Looking at Qin Feng's gloomy face, Ren Qi'er was helpless. She said, the number 1 person is too mysterious. His whereabouts are strange. No one knows where he came from. Even now, there are only a few people who have seen his face. Qin Feng opened his mouth in shock. Not only was this person's information simple, but there were only a few people who had seen his face. He was too mysterious. Isn't the ranking on the ambitious person list based on battle records? Could it be that this young Master Meow doesn't even have any battle records, and yet he's ranked first? That's not it. Ren Qi'er shook her head and paused for a moment. Some of his achievements are from a long time ago. What's more, he didn't seem to have experienced any big waves along the way. There weren't any great battles, nor were there any eye-catching battles, nor were there any classic battles with famous experts. So, the records about him are very vague. Qin Feng frowned. He looked at Ren Qi'er and said softly, that alone isn't enough for him to be ranked number 1. Yes. Ren Qi'er nodded and looked at Qin Feng. She suddenly asked, do you know the origin of the nickname, Young Master Meow? Qin Feng raised his eyebrows and looked at Ren Qi'er without saying a word. He got this nickname because of the battle that happened more than a year ago. At this point, Ren Qi'er suddenly paused. Qin Feng could clearly see that her jade-like hands were clenched tightly. After a long silence, Qi'er looked up Yu Yang and said softly, Young Master Meow, Yu Yang Master Meow, Master Meow, Yu Yang, Yu Yang, Yu Yang, Master Meow, Master of Yu Yang, Yang, Yu Yang, Yu Yang, Yu Yang, Yu Yang, Yang Meow, Yu Yang, Yang, Yang Meow, Yu Yang, Yu Yang, Yang. At that time, there was a lot of controversy about his ranking. Later, from the 4th to the 20th, there were nearly 10 people who formed a team. They were not convinced that a person with an average battle record was ranked number 1. They all wanted to measure his strength. Hence, these people formed a team and found the person's temporary residence. However, the result was Ren Qi'er sighed softly and looked at Qin Feng. She said softly, the result was that all of them died. None of them survived. Qin Feng's pupils contracted fiercely at this time. Nearly 10 formidable people had all fallen. This result was too shocking. With such combat strength, according to the current strength of the formidable heroes list, even if he were to fight against the 3rd place, Su Yi, and the 2nd place, Su Yu, it would be impossible for him to have such a result. Even if he was no match for them, many of them should be able to escape. However, these 10 people had all died. This battle strength was indeed terrifying. Young Master Meow deserved the title of number 1. Looking at the shocked look on Qin Feng's face, Ren Qi'er shook her head and said softly, however, this is not the most shocking thing. The most terrifying thing is that he killed them with one move. He didn't kill one person with one move. Instead, he killed a group of people with one move. Qin Feng's shrunken pupils suddenly widened. He clenched his fists. His heart was in turmoil. Young Master Meow killed nearly 10 ambitious people with one move. Just thinking about it made his scalp tingle. This was not a battle at all. It was a massacre. Perhaps many people didn't believe this statement at first, but it was confirmed later. Ren Qi'er sighed inexplicably and said, back then, although some ambitious and ruthless people didn't join the team, they secretly followed them. According to them, at that time, they saw a black line that seemed to cut the sky into two halves. When the black line disappeared, Nearly 10 ruthless people were all killed. And from the beginning to the end, whether it was the nearly 10 ambitious people in the team or the ambitious people who secretly followed, they only saw the black line and did not see the person. Because the black line left a deep and terrifying impression on people, no one knew his name. His moves were unpredictable, and his whereabouts were unpredictable. In addition, people said that when he appeared, he was surrounded by an ethereal, immortal chi and stars. As the saying goes, young master is unparalleled in this world. Later on, he was respectfully called Young Master Meow. It was also at that time that people truly understood that it wasn't that young Master Meow's battle results were mediocre. Rather, it was that no formidable character had appeared that could force him into a bitter battle. The reason why his battle results were not eye-catching was because he had always only used one move. Moreover, everyone who fought him had died under that one move. Therefore, very few people know his true appearance even now. The list of ambitious people is not absolute. The rankings change frequently. Even Sister Yu, who is currently ranked second, only reached her current position after killing the ambitious person who was ranked second on the list of ambitious people a year and a half ago. But young Master Meow is different. Since he reached the first position, he has never moved. Hearing Ren Shi's words, Qin Feng fell into silence. After a long while, he sighed softly. Sin City is indeed a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Now you know that the list of ambitious people is not that simple. Rinchi also walked out of her emotions. When she saw Qin Feng's expression, she could not help but chuckle. I have indeed underestimated him. Qin Feng smiled faintly. He did not feel embarrassed. He was not from here, so it was normal for him to not be familiar with this place. Moreover, even after knowing this, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear. Instead, there was a raging fire burning in the depths of his eyes. The path of an expert was to constantly move forward, to be fearless, and to dare to challenge any opponent. Moreover, even if Zhou Ji's strength was barely comparable to a 2-heaven stage cultivator, Qin Feng was not necessarily inferior to him. If he did not care about the consequences, Qin Feng was confident that he would be on par with him. Chapter 556. The situation, although I have underestimated these people, if it's just Zhou Ji alone, I think I should have nothing to fear, Qin Feng said with a faint smile. Hearing this, Rin Xier was stunned. She tilted her head and sized up Qin Feng in front of her. Then, she said softly, "Are you confident in dealing with Zhou Ji? It shouldn't be difficult to escape, right?" Qin Feng rubbed his nose and laughed softly. Looking at the smiling Qin Feng in front of her, Rin Xier nodded thoughtfully. Then, she reminded him, "If you are not afraid of Zhou Ji, then what about Su Yi? I just told you that Zhou Ji is not the most troublesome one. The most troublesome one is Su Yi." Looking at the astonished Qin Feng, Rin Xier ran her fingers through her hair and said, "Zhou Ji and Su Yi have a good relationship. Well, to be precise, he is under Su Ye's protection. Zhu Xia, who is ranked 4th on the ambitious person list, has some grudges with Zhou Ji. The reason why she did not attack Zhou Ji is also because of Su Yi. What, they're in cahoots? Even forming an alliance? It's not really an alliance, but it's close." Ren Xier shook her head, then nodded and said, "Although these people have their own rankings and have their own pride, what kind of place is this? It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it is the most chaotic and bloody place. Therefore, even if they are infamous, they will still be hunted down and killed by their enemies. They're all ambitious and ruthless people who use killing to prove their Tao. Who hasn't taken lives before? Therefore, many of them have enemies. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they have a blood feud. No matter how strong a person is, there will be a time when he is exhausted. At this time, it is extremely important to have helpers. Therefore, don't look at how arrogant these people are. In fact, some of them have secretly reached a consensus. When one side is attacked, the others will definitely come to help. This Zhou Hen is also a scheming person. He knows Su Yan's temperament and knows how to cater to his interests. I don't know where he kidnapped an extremely beautiful woman of extreme Yin from, but he gave her to Su Yin. Coincidentally, it was also because of this woman that Su Yin successfully made a breakthrough using the method of harvesting Yin to supplement Yang. This caused him great joy, and he even gave an order that Zhou Hen was his friend. Whoever dared to touch him would be disrespectful to him, Su Yin. With his support, who in Sin City would dare to harm Zhou Ji? Their shameless actions are blasphemous to us women. At the end of her words, Ren Qi-er's tone was filled with anger and disgust. Hearing this, Qin Feng nodded slightly. Using the method of degrading women to break through was indeed despicable. He poured a cup of water and handed it to Ren Qi. After drinking the water, the anger on her face subsided a lot. It is said that the beautiful woman has some relationship with Zhu Xia. When she found out about this, she was extremely angry and immediately went to find Zhou Ji for revenge. However, Su Yi broke through because of this. How could he let Zhu Xia bully Zhou Ji? Moreover, he had already taken a fancy to Zhu Xia's beauty, so he captured her at that time. Later on, it was Sister Yu who saved Zhu Xia. Because of this, the two sides were very unhappy and fought many times. The most serious time was when both sides invited all the allies they could invite. A terrible war that would affect the power structure of the entire Sin City was about to happen, but at the critical moment, for some reason, both sides stopped at the same time. Speaking of this, Ren Qi-er's face suddenly became a little strange. She said softly, later on, Su Yi let Zhu Xia go, and the latter did not hold on to this matter. At that time, the matter was quite strange. Only a few people knew the inside story, but no one mentioned it. Slowly, this matter was forgotten. After that, I asked Sister Yu about it, but she also kept it a secret. Ren Qi said softly, listening to her words. Qin Feng was silent for a moment. Then he smiled and said, "It seems that the grievances between these ambitious people are not all personal." Seeing that Qin Feng seemed to have misunderstood the main point, Ren Qi could not help but roll her eyes. She reminded him, "I'm not telling you this to let you know who is allied with whom and who is enmity with whom. Instead, I want you to realize that the real enemy you are facing is not Zhou Hen, but Su Yi. If Su Yi knows that there is a beautiful woman here who has no backing, he will definitely be tempted." Ren Qi looked at Qin Feng and said seriously, "With Sister Yu here, he won't dare to do anything to me. But you are different. Do you think Su Yi will let you and the little beauty beside you go?" "No." Qin Feng shook his head and smiled. "If you know, you won't be so calm. I really don't know what you are thinking." Glancing at Qin Feng, Ren Qi could not help but roll her eyes. Could it be that, after talking for so long, this person still did not know the seriousness of the matter? That was Su Yi, third on the ambitious person list. He was a powerful existence that could make the entire Sin City tremble with a stomp of his foot. Why did she feel that this person did not care at all? Was he ignorant? Or was he really not afraid? Qin Feng did not think much about it. He and Su Yi had already formed a grudge. This Zhou Ji had nothing to do with him at all. Ren Qi did not think too much and did not say anything. She had already reminded him. As for what would happen in the future, she could not control it. It was already very good that she could do this. "Thank you." Qin Feng smiled and nodded. After a slight hesitation, he said, "Can you help me send a letter to this matter needs to be done secretly. Don't let them find out where I am. Just tell them that I am safe and let them leave here." Since he had already entered the Guanghan Palace, Qin Feng did not want Yi Wu and Zhou Mo to get involved. It was best to let them leave this place. Ren Qi nodded and said, "Sister, you will probably be back in 1 or 2 days. I can only try my best to buy you some time. As for how long she will let you stay here, I don't know. I will leave the matter of the explosion to you. Staying here is her best choice." Ren Qi pointed at the explosion on the bed and said. Then she left without looking back. After she left, Qin Feng's seemingly indifferent face gradually became a little dignified. It was not that he did not take Ren Qi-er's words to heart. So Yu was able to occupy the 3rd position on the list of ambitious and ruthless heroes, which showed his strength. Such a person was a hero. However, trepidation was trepidation. Qin Feng didn't feel too much fear. He didn't plan to stay here for long and would leave once he found an opportunity. Hence, whether the people here were strong or weak, good or bad, they had nothing to do with him. Qin Feng's finger stroked the spiritual light on the scroll. Finally, he tapped it heavily. His gaze was as sharp as an unsheathed sword. And beneath his fingertip, spiritual light flickered and two words slowly appeared. Suyi. Chapter 557. Can't be cleared in the middle of the night. Qin Feng removed the wood god's seal from exploding flower and let out a sigh of relief. During this time, he had been healing exploding flower. The bruises and hidden injuries on her body were almost completely healed. She was about to completely recover. One more time, and she should be able to completely recover. However, the blood goo is still very troublesome. I have to think of a way. With a sigh, Qin Feng threw away these emotions. He found a clean corner and sat down cross-legged to enter a state of cultivation. The night passed silently until dawn. When the warm sunlight once again poured over the land, Qin Feng also withdrew from his state of cultivation. He came to the bedside and looked at exploding flower who still showed no signs of waking up. He couldn't help but frown. It had been more than half a day. It was reasonable to say that exploding flower's strength wasn't bad, and her body should have a certain resistance to these low-level drugs. She should have woken up by now, so why wasn't she waking up? Qin Feng frowned. Suddenly, he saw that there seemed to be a green mark on exploding flower's white neck. However, he couldn't see it clearly because it was covered by her collar. Could there be another reason? Qin Feng frowned and stared at the exposed green mark. Then, he looked at exploding flower who showed no signs of waking up. After hesitating for a moment, he stretched out his hands and wanted to open the collar to see what the green mark was. His hand were placed on both sides of the collar. As his hands gradually separated, the collar protecting her neck was pulled open. Suddenly, a large snow-white mark entered Qin Feng's eyes. Qin Feng frowned. This green mark was very short, about 2 inches long. It extended all the way to the position corresponding to the collarbone. At first glance, it looked like a blue vein. Old devil, what is this? After looking at it for a long time, Qin Feng still didn't know what it was. He could only ask the demon eye. This little girl is very unusual. The demon eye said, I know. Her original body should be a spirit beast. Qin Feng nodded. It's not that simple. Qin Feng was stunned. Could it be that her original body is an archaic descendant? I told you it's not that simple. Demon Eye shook his head and said in a low voice, You forgot her situation in the Yin prison. Qin Feng shuddered. If the Devil Eye hadn't been mentioned, he would have almost forgotten that the big flower explosion was very sensitive to the Yin prison. Could she be from hell? Qin Feng smiled awkwardly. I don't know. In short, this little girl's heel is very mysterious and strange. I can't see anything about it now, but I think she should have some connection with the legendary underworld. After a pause, the demon eye said, There are some things that cannot be investigated or probed. Otherwise, you will be entangled with great karma. You just need to let nature take its course. Hearing this, Qin Feng nodded and carefully touched the green mark. However, just as Qin Feng's finger touched the green mark from the corner of his eye, he discovered that big exploding flower, whose eyes were tightly shut, suddenly opened her eyes. Their eyes met, and Qin Feng was stunned. He didn't know why, but he seemed to have seen a flash of green light in big exploding flower's eyes when she first opened her eyes. It made his heart involuntarily shiver. When the big flower explosion opened her eyes, she saw Qin Feng's strange face. She blinked her eyes blankly, and then her gaze slowly moved down and finally landed on his hands. At this moment, one of his hands was grabbing her collar, and the other was touching her neck. The lake-like eyes were filled with confusion. After blinking a few times, the big flower explosion suddenly said, Uncle, I'm hungry. Okay, Uncle will take you to eat later. Qin Feng smiled and picked up the big flower explosion. The latter sat in his arms docilely and wrapped her arms around his neck like a child. After being rescued by Qin Feng, The big flower explosion became even more dependent on him. Big flower explosion. What is this green mark here? Qin Feng pulled open her collar and asked while pointing at the green mark. Really? Why don't I know? Where is it? It's here. Qin Feng touched the green mark and used his touch to tell her its position and shape. It's strange. I don't think it's here before. Are you guys? Just as Qin Feng's voice fell, there was a sudden sound of surprise outside the door. Qin Feng suddenly turned his head and saw Ren Shi standing outside the door. At this time, the door was wide open, and she stared blankly at the two people in the room who were hugging each other. Her gaze was unspeakably unnatural, and her cheeks were a bit shocked and blushed. Qin Feng also looked at Ren Shi, whose cheeks were quickly blushing, and then followed her gaze and finally stopped at his hand. At this moment, the big flower explosion was hugging his neck and sitting in his arms, and he put his hand into the big flower explosion's collar. With his posture, it would be difficult for people who are not familiar with the situation not to think about it. Well, did I disturb you guys? Sorry, you can continue. Looking at the two of them, Ren Shi seemed to think of something. Suddenly, her whole face blushed, and she quickly wanted to withdraw. It's not what you think. We didn't do anything. You didn't disturb us. Qin Feng's palm left the big flower explosion's neck as if he was electrocuted. He didn't know how to explain it, so he could only say this. However, in Ren Shi's view, this explanation was more like a reminder to her that they had already been disturbed by her. What's the use of saying this now? Ren Shi's cheeks were blushing. She wanted to withdraw and close the door for the two of them. Qin Feng put down the big flower explosion and quickly leaned against the door. He rubbed his temples and stammered, not knowing what to say. The two of them had gone through so much. In his heart, the big flower explosion was just a child, a little girl. He had always thought so. Moreover, he had always been with acquaintances and was hunted down. He didn't think so much, so he didn't have any scruples when interacting with her. His actions were purely to treat the big flower explosion as a child. There was no other thought. But in the eyes of others, it was a different thing. The big flower explosion was not small, and she was very cute. She was the standard little lowly. Some people with a special orientation naturally liked her very much. Qin Feng, although this kind of thing is consensual, your orientation is still not good. She's still young. Ren Shi whispered and persuaded. You should wait for her to grow up before making a move. Why would I make a move? Qin Feng said helplessly. You're really thinking too much. In my heart, she's just a child like a little sister. Little sister. Ren Shi suddenly opened her eyes wide and said, Qin Feng, coupled with this orientation, it's a moral problem. This bottom line can't be broken. Qin Feng was speechless. This really couldn't be washed clean, even if he jumped into the ninth heaven spirit liquid pool. The two of them just stood there and didn't speak for a while. The atmosphere was strangely ambiguous. The big flower explosion opened her big eyes and looked at the two of them. She didn't know what they were talking about. In the end, she couldn't stand the hunger and said weakly, Uncle, I'm hungry. When can I eat? Okay, I'll take you there now. Qin Feng seemed to have caught a life-saving straw and quickly said, my little sister has a big appetite. She can eat the food of 10 people, so... Qin Feng looked at Ren Shi. The latter nodded slightly and quickly ran out and ordered people to send the food in. In the room, looking at the big flower explosion, Ren Shi was surprised and opened her mouth wide. She can eat so much. Where did it all go? Looking at the big flower explosion that didn't change at all, Ren Shi muttered. She's like this. She can eat a lot and has a lot of strength. Qin Feng smiled. The two of them looked at each other and awkwardly looked away. For a moment, they were speechless. Qin Feng wanted to explain, but he didn't know where to start. Miss Ren, I don't know why you're here so early? With a dry cough, Qin Feng asked. Chapter 558. By Baoshan, Qin Feng was slightly surprised. He nodded and asked, How much time did she give me? Ren Shi shook her head and suddenly changed the topic. Are you here just to save Big Popcorn? Did you get the news beforehand? Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Qin Feng was puzzled. What news? That was his original intention. If he didn't know that Big Popcorn was here, he wouldn't even bother to get close to this place. Qin Feng narrowed his eyes and didn't say anything. He thought for a moment and knew that Ren Xier was talking about something else. He looked at Ren Xier quietly, wanting to know what news she was talking about. Who doesn't know about Bai Baoshan's news? Who knew that big explosion would suddenly say something? You're really here for Bai Baoshan? Ren Xier looked at Qin Feng with a knowing look. After a long while, she said in an unclear tone, your thoughts are really a little strange. You actually have such thoughts. Why? Is the legend of Bai Baoshan fake? Qin Feng frowned and asked. From Big Popcorn's tone, it seemed that Bai Baoshan was an open secret in Sin City. No one knows if it's real or fake, but Ren Xier suddenly sighed and said softly, it seems that you guys really don't know this place. The story of Bai Baoshan is too strange. This place is remote and desolate. The reason why there are so many people and ruthless people coming and going is mostly because of this mountain. Most of them were attracted by the so-called treasure. However, after so many years, many people have entered this mountain, but I've never heard of anyone obtaining any treasure. However, I've seen a lot of strange phenomena. Ren Xier said softly. I guessed right. Qin Feng thought. He was just asking to test the waters. He didn't expect that the legend of the treasure would really blow up. In that case, this mountain only has a name? Qin Feng asked. You can't say that. However, no one can tell if it's real or not. Ren Xier shook her head and said, all these years, many people have entered Bai Baoshan. However, everyone's feelings are different. In the end, no one obtained anything real. Hence, some people left, but some people still stay here and go in and out of this mountain. Everyone thinks that this mountain is strange. There might be some great treasure hidden in it, and one needs a great opportunity to obtain it. However, after waiting year after year and entering again and again, no one has obtained this so-called opportunity. Year after year, day after day, with the passage of time, people's burning desire for the treasure was gradually extinguished by the cruel reality. Many people sadly discovered that there might be a treasure here, but no one could obtain it. Looking at the two of them, Ren Xier said in a slightly complicated tone, if you want to enter the White Treasure Mountain to search for treasures, you don't need to hide at all because no one will pay attention to you at all. For so many years, countless heroes have tried, and some have even spent their entire lives, but in the end, who has gained anything from that mountain? Hearing Ren Xier's words, Feng Chen frowned. He knew about Bai Baoshan, but he didn't expect there to be such a strange place in Sin City. Looks like there's something mysterious about this Bai Baoshan. Qin Feng thought to himself. Merely, after so many years and generations of accumulation, the number of people that entered the White Treasure Mountain to search for treasures had likely reached a frightening number. However, even with this being the case, no one was able to say for sure what exactly was in the White Treasure Mountain. Qin Feng rolled his eyes and asked calmly, it can't be. Why did I hear that people have obtained good things from mountain? That's just a rumor made up by some busybodies. They purposely made this mountain sound mysterious. Ren Xier didn't know that Qin Feng was lying to her. She shook her head and said, it's impossible to obtain any treasures from there. I told you about the ambitious person list yesterday. Most people have entered it more than once or twice. Even people as strong as Su Yi, Sister Yu, and even the elusive Mr. Swan have never obtained anything. After so many years, I've never heard of anyone obtaining anything from there. Ren Xier said in a self-deprecating tone. Big Popcorn was silent for a while. Then he suddenly raised his head and asked, what about the moving skeleton? Hearing this, Ren Xier's face changed slightly, but she quickly recovered. She smiled and said, I've heard some rumors about it, but I don't know if it's true or not. It's just that no one believes it's true. Qin Feng narrowed his eyes and stared at Ren Xier's expression. Her change in expression didn't escape his eyes, but he didn't say anything and kept silent. He glanced at Big Popcorn, who continued to eat after asking a question, and said to himself, It seems that she knows something about Bai Baoshan. I'll have to find a time to ask her. Looking at the silent Qin Feng, Run Xier asked, "You still want to go in and search for treasures? Since I'm already here, why not go in and have a look? It's better to give up." Qin Feng smiled faintly. To be honest, he was intrigued by Run Xier's words. Hearing this, Run Xier didn't say anything and just shook her head. "By the way, what's the news you just mentioned?" Qin Feng suddenly asked. Since everyone knew about Bai Baoshan, Run Xier didn't need to ask. Her news was obviously referring to something else. Ren Xier paused and looked hesitant. "Forget it. If it's inconvenient, don't say it." Qin Feng shook his head. Ren Xier pursed her lips and shook her head after a while. She seemed to have made up her mind about something and said, "Actually, this news is already spread. Even if I don't tell you, you'll naturally hear about it when you're outside." It said that two mysterious spiritual beasts ran into Bai Baoshan. Spiritual beasts? Mysterious? Yes, they're indeed mysterious. Ren Xier nodded her head and glanced around. Suddenly, she leaned forward and whispered, "Just now, sister, you told me that two very mysterious spirit beasts broke into the White Treasure Mountain. These two spirit beasts weren't very strong. They seemed to be barely at the early stage of the Sixth Order. But according to Sister Yu, even if she, Su Yi, Zhu Xia, and Bo Jian joined forces, they still couldn't catch these two spirit beasts." Hearing this, Qin Feng narrowed his eyes and was secretly shocked. Two early-stage, sixth-rank spiritual beasts were so powerful that even the four heroes from the second to the fifth on the list of ambitious people couldn't catch them. Chapter 559. News. Qin Feng was secretly shocked. At the same time, he was somewhat puzzled. What kind of spiritual beast could be so powerful? From what he knew, an ordinary sixth-rank spiritual beast would not be able to deal with Su Yu, Su Yin, and the other two even if they had various advantages. After all, whether it was Su Yu or Su Yin, they had the terrifying strength to kill a third heaven realm cultivator. Although the other two had not reached this stage, which one of them was a rookie on the formidable person list. Bo Jian and Zhu Xia could be considered as overlords in the two heaven realm. With the four of them working together, not to mention an early sixth-rank spiritual beast, they might even have the strength to fight a middle sixth-rank spiritual beast. What kind of spiritual beast could be so powerful? Qin Feng was puzzled. Suddenly, his mind flashed and his eyes slowly widened. He stared at Ren Qi, and asked with uncertainty, "These two spiritual beasts shouldn't be ordinary spiritual beasts, right?" The latter raised her eyebrows and looked at Qin Feng in astonishment. Then she smiled and said, "So smart. They are indeed not ordinary spiritual beasts. Sister, you said that these two spiritual beasts are likely to be archaic descendants. One is called a snow rabbit, and the other seems to be a monkey. No one knows what species it is, but sister, you guessed that it is likely to be an 8-armed divine monkey." Snow rabbit, 8-armed divine monkey. Although Qin Feng's expression did not change, there was no doubt that waves were set off in his heart. Snow rabbit, 8-armed divine monkey. They were both rare archaic descendants. When he found out that the nine-nether snake was an archaic descendant, Mo Yin had told him about this spiritual beast. Many archaic descendants had been cut off in the passage of time, and the nine-nether snake was one of them. The snow rabbit and 8-armed divine monkey were also said to be extremely rare. They had not appeared in front of people for thousands of years. It was said that these two archaic descendants had been destroyed in the river of time. However, he did not expect that in this desolate and remote Sin City, not only would two archaic descendants appear, but they were also the rare snow rabbit and 8-armed divine monkey. How could this not shock people? If anyone could get their hands on it, as long as they nurtured it well, it would be enough to become a giant in the great Northwest in the future. Regardless of whether it was a force, a family, or an individual cultivator who owned this beast, they would all be existences of the great Northwest. This was because they had an archaic species that could influence the plans of the entire Northwest Territory. Once an archaic descendant appeared, it would cause a huge commotion. Countless people would turn red with envy. Both of them are Archean remnant spirit beasts, born to be supreme masters. If anyone can get one of them, they will be able to cultivate a super master who can reach the ninth heaven. Rinshi clenched her small fists, her big eyes flashing with excitement. Qin Feng squinted his eyes, and there was a glint in his eyes. To be honest, although he paid more attention to his own strength, he could not help but have some thoughts in his mind. After all, that was a remnant species spirit beast, a natural powerhouse. Although he already had the 9 nether snake, it did not prevent him from getting another one. Moreover, the 9 nether snake was still evolving, and these two had already reached the 6th level. According to the information he heard from the Demon Eye, the Snow Rabbit was an extremely powerful divine beast clan in the primordial era. Its ancestor should be the legendary 8-feet heaven-trampling rabbit. It was said that one of its feet could crush mountains, 2 of its feet could crush mountains and rivers, and when all 8 of its feet were used together, it could crush an entire continent. As for the 8-armed divine monkey, its origin was even more mysterious. The demon I did not say anything, and only introduced it in a few sentences. However, Qin Feng had some impression of one of the points. It was said that it could compete with the moon. Although it was not clearly stated, the fact that it could compete with the moon was enough to show the horror of this divine beast. Whether it was the Snow Rabbit or the 8-armed divine monkey, they were both true Archean remnant species. Their ancestors were the real masters, and they had great potential. Whoever got their hands on them would be able to command a region in the future. How did you get this information? Or rather, how did Su Yu and the others know about this? Qin Feng suddenly asked. I'm not sure about this. Rinshi shook her head. After thinking for a while, she suddenly said, but from the conversation between her and Sister Linxia, this matter seems to be related to a few students from Taishan Academy. Those students are also chasing after these 2 remnant species spiritual beasts. Taishan Academy? Qin Feng was shocked. That was one of the 4 super academies that was famous throughout the continent. Yes, it should be. Ren Qi nodded. So during the fight, Sister Yu agreed to cooperate with Su Yi because the students of Taishan Academy are all quite terrifying. By the way, aren't you going to Baibao Mountain to search for treasures? Why don't you come with us? This way, we can take care of each other, Rinshi suddenly said. This should be the idea of the woman from Guanghan Palace. Qin Feng's mind worked quickly as he considered the gains and losses. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Rinshi. When the latter was a little unnatural, he smiled faintly and said, That's good too, but I don't know when the people from Guanghan Palace will leave. Rinshi face was slightly happy. She said, We will leave in 2 days. Qin Feng nodded and suddenly asked, When will she come? Rinshi was stunned and stared blankly at Qin Feng. She didn't understand what he meant. It's nothing. Qin Feng shook his head and didn't say anything more, but his eyes were very deep. Rinshi should have told Su Yu about his situation with the big explosion. At this moment, the latter was talking about the archaic species and proposed to enter Baibao Mountain together. It was most likely the idea of that woman because they needed help, and the beast-fighting tyrant, the green scale monster, who was undefeated with Zhou Ji, was naturally the best partner because they didn't have any background. But Qin Feng wasn't the kind of person who would casually cooperate with people he didn't know. So he wanted to meet Su Yu, who was ranked 2nd on the list of ambitious people. At least he wanted to test her background and understand what kind of person she was. And Qin Feng also believed that Su Yu had the same idea. No one would feel at ease using a partner who they didn't know the details of. Now that the archaic species had appeared in Baibao Mountain, it was no longer a secret to the outside world. There was no difference between going in alone and going in with a partner. But if he followed Guanghan Palace, at least he didn't have to worry about Zhou Ji's actions. But the premise was that he had to meet Su Yu. After parting with Rinshi, Qin Feng and the big explosion stayed in Guanghan Palace. Except for Rinshi, who occasionally came to see them, no one else disturbed them. For 3 days, Su Yu didn't appear, and Qin Feng didn't ask to see her. Late at night, on the third day, everything was silent. Qin Feng sat cross-legged on the bed, absorbing the heaven and earth spirit qi to consolidate his body. Suddenly, there was a slight knock on the door. He opened his eyes and looked at the door. On his face, there was no sadness or joy, a faint smile. Chapter 560. Second Xiao, Xiong, Su Yedong Dong Dong. A series of rhythmic knocks on the door broke the silence of the night. Qin Feng opened his eyes. Within his ink-black eyes, there was a trace of a complicated smile. After a moment of silence, Qin Feng got up and walked to the door. He paused for a moment, and an inaudible sigh rose from the depths of his heart. Then, he no longer hesitated and opened the door. As the door opened, a delicate fragrance with a trace of perfume wafted out. Just by smelling the fragrance, one's mind would be slightly dazzled. Qin Feng steadied his mind and sized up the charming woman that appeared in front of him. The beautiful woman was about 25 or 26 years old. She wore a purple-brown dress that not only showed off her extremely alluring and graceful figure, but also showed a kind of magnanimity. She had a pair of lively peach blossom eyes. Her slender eyelashes were like small palm leaf fans that gently fluttered. At first glance, she was like the girl next door, lively and lively. But within this, there was an indescribable temptation. Her seductive eyes were charming, enchanting, gorgeous, as if they could suck away a person's mind. Soul-stirring. This was an extremely beautiful woman that was filled with temptation. Within her gentleness, there was a trace of threatening fierceness. Like a poisonous rose with thorns, enchanting and dangerous, and should not be approached. This was Qin Feng's first impression of this beautiful woman. Seeing that Qin Feng in front of her did not reveal the stunned expression that other people saw, the lady was slightly astonished. She immediately displayed a smile, and the sky that originally still had some starlight seemed to have suddenly lost its color. "What? You let such a delicate beauty stand outside the door?" the woman said with a smile. Her sweet and soft voice could make one's heart tremble. Qin Feng rubbed his nose, smiled faintly, and said, "I'm afraid that if I close the door, I'll become a human being. I will become neither a human nor a beast." "Oh." The woman raised her eyebrows slightly and asked with a smile, "How are you neither human nor beast?" Such a beautiful woman appeared in my room in the middle of the night. As a normal man, I can't guarantee that I won't do something beastly. Staring at the beautiful woman in front of him, Qin Feng licked his lips and said, "But if I don't do anything, I'm afraid I'll be worse than a beast. If I do it, I'm a beast. If I don't, I'm worse than a beast. Don't you think I'm neither human nor beast?" Pucci. Seeing Qin Feng's serious expression, the beautiful woman couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. She rolled her eyes at Qin Feng and squeezed her way in. "You're not surprised to see me. Do you know why I'm here? Do you know who I am?" The beautiful woman casually sat on a chair. She turned her head to look at Qin Feng and said with a slightly surprised smile. The hand holding the door slightly paused. Qin Feng smiled and gently closed the door. He turned around and stared at the beautiful woman without blinking. He said softly, "Second on the ambitious person list, master of the Guanghan Palace, Su Yu." An imperceptible surprise flashed across her eyes. Su Yu nodded and said, "It seems that little Seven was right. You're not an ordinary person." Qin Feng smiled and didn't say anything. Su Yu looked at Qin Feng with her seductive eyes. After a while, she asked with interest, "Why? Aren't you going to ask why I'm here? Why do I want to see you?" "Since Miss Rin told me that news in the morning, I knew that it should be your idea." Sitting across from Su Yu, Qin Feng looked at the pair of sparkling eyes. They were like a girl next door who didn't know anything about the world, but also seemed to have seen through everything. He smiled and said softly, "As for why, if I'm not wrong, it should have something to do with entering Baobao Mountain tomorrow. Go on." Su Yu nodded her head, looking very excited. "I have to say that the Guanghan Palace has its own strong points. However, it's undeniable that it doesn't have a superior position in Taiying Town. To be precise, it's in a rather awkward position. Su Yu's smiling face paused for a moment. She squinted her beautiful eyes and stared at Feng Chen seriously. After a while, she nodded slowly but didn't say anything. Although she didn't show anything on the surface, her clenched hands betrayed her inner feelings. She didn't expect that the Guanghan Palace's problems, which few people had seen through, would be so thoroughly analyzed by a young man who had just arrived. Actually, this is also normal, especially beauties like you who have excellent looks and temperaments. You're all fat meat dripping with oil. Which side isn't covetously eyeing you? The reason why you've been safe for so many years is because they're afraid of you. They can't break the balance here. Once the balance is tilted one day, I'm afraid it'll be time for them to attack. This trip to Baobao Mountain may be an opportunity. I don't know why, but there's definitely another force that can break the balance between the two sides. If we fail this time, the Guanghan Palace may very well be destroyed. Staring at Su Yu, who was becoming calmer and calmer, Qin Feng paused and said softly, "And you know for Miss Ren that I can contend with Zhou Ji, who is ranked 8th on the ambitious person list. Zhou Ji and Su Yu are in cahoots, and Su Yu is your biggest enemy. Zhou Ji and I have some grudges. As the saying goes, the enemy of an enemy is a friend. You want me to contain Zhou Ji and reduce the pressure on your side. Because the person behind Zhou Ji is Su Yu, I can only listen to your suggestion and cooperate with you. This way, I'll be under your protection." Glancing at Su Yu, who was staring at him, Qin Feng smiled faintly. Su Yu was silent for a while. After a long while, she raised her head and looked at Qin Feng. She said softly, "If I wasn't sure that you're not from here, I would have suspected that you're a spy from their side. So, my analysis is correct," Qin Feng said with a smile. Looking at Qin Feng seriously, Su Yu's expression gradually returned to normal. She ran her fingers through her hair and glanced at Qin Feng. The casual, flirtatious look made the latter subconsciously swallow his saliva. "You're really smart. Your analysis is pretty close." Su Yu said softly. "How is it?" Qin Feng asked with a smile. In fact, when he said this, he was also very nervous. He just wanted to know more about the Guanghan Palace. Based on the situation in Sin City and his own understanding of human nature, he made his analysis. He didn't know the real situation, but it seemed that his analysis was correct. Looking at the calm Su Yu, Qin Feng slowly shook his head under the astonished gaze of the former. Chapter 561. Extortion. Looks like you've underestimated Su Yi. Even if you can contend against Zhou Ji, the gap between you and Su Yi is still too big. Shaking her head, Su Yu sighed. "Cooperating with us is your best choice. At least we can help you restrain Su Yi." Hearing this, Qin Feng faintly smiled and said, "In Su Ye's eyes, I'm just a small character. Do you think he will have the energy to consider me when he enters Baibao Mountain to fight for the archaic remains? Even if he does, how can he send out the top few people on the ambitious person list? I don't have much enmity with them. In front of the archaic remains, it doesn't even count as enmity. But by doing this, you've directly pulled me to the opposite side of them. You've created such a strong enemy for me. Do you think this is an equal cooperation? Moreover, I may not be Su Ye's opponent, but..." Speaking up to here, Qin Feng suddenly paused. He faintly stared at Su Yu and was silent for a moment. Then he softly said, "But if I want to leave, I'm afraid that Su Yi may not be able to stop me." This was the truth. He was indeed not Su Ye's opponent. But with the demonic eye, Qin Feng was confident that escaping would not be a problem. Su Yu's expression slightly changed. Her eyes congealed as she stared at Qin Feng. She wanted to see a trace of lying expression from the latter's face, but she failed in the end. Qin Feng's face was as calm as an ancient well. She couldn't see any falsehood in his expression. "Do you have the confidence to escape from Su Ye's hands?" Su Yu softly asked with a serious expression. Qin Feng did not comment. Su Yu lightly sucked in a breath of cold air. "Doesn't this mean that even I may not be able to do anything to this person? Don't think that I'm very strong. It's just that I've always been chased by people in the past, so I have some skills in escaping." Looking at Su Yu's serious expression, Qin Feng smiled and said. Hearing this, Su Yu's expression turned for the better. She rolled her eyes at him. She really thought that he could contend against powerhouses at the level of her and Su Yi just because he was at the peak of the half step. But like I said, I can't beat Su Yi, but I can still leave. So, I don't need to get involved in the cooperation you mentioned. But it was our Guanghan Palace that took you in at a critical moment. It's only right that we ask for your help, Su Yu said. First of all, I would like to remind you that it was Ren Qi who helped me, not the Guanghan Palace. Furthermore, it was I who saved Ren Qi first, so it is only right that you repay me. Qin Feng shook his head and said indifferently, At the critical moment, I will be responsible for Ren Qi's safety. As for the rest, forget it. Su Yu was a little troubled by Qin Feng's stubbornness. From a short conversation, she knew that Qin Feng was not a simple person. Moreover, he had a green-scale monster that obeyed him, which was a rare help. Now that the Guanghan Palace's situation was not good, she was not willing to give up such a good helper. However, this guy's temper was too stubborn. Just as she was having a headache, Qin Feng's voice sounded, It's not impossible for me to help. Hearing this, Su Yu's spirit was lifted. She hurriedly looked at Qin Feng. But I want a reward. Just treat it as if you were asking me to help. Qin Feng said indifferently. What reward? Su Yu was stunned for a moment. Then she asked cautiously. I'm a poor rogue cultivator. I don't have any high-level battle skills. You have to provide me with a heaven-level battle skill to increase my battle power. Qin Feng's face seemed to have a smile. Above the heaven-level battle skill was the heaven level. As the name suggested, it was a 9th-level heaven-level battle skill. Qin Feng's current heaven-level battle skill was only the Undying Tensei, and Zhou Tianqing Scripture of Death. His Tao of condensing 3 elements could barely enter the heaven-level battle skill. However, his other skills were limited by his strength. The Undying Tensei, and Zhou Tianqing Scripture of Death consumed too much energy. He needed a move that did not consume too much energy, but was lethal to a 9th-level heaven-level powerhouse. The demonic I only provided Zhou Tianqing Scripture of Death. It would not help him with the heaven-level battle skill. In its words, it would only help at the critical juncture and could not pave the way for him. Therefore, Qin Feng could only think of a way himself. As his strength increased, the heaven-level battle skill was somewhat useless. He needed a more lethal heaven-level battle skill. The Guanghan Palace was a very good choice. In fact, he was gambling. He was gambling that the Guanghan Palace was in a very dangerous situation. Otherwise, Su Yu would definitely not give a damn about him. Su Yu's beautiful eyes looked at Qin Feng indifferently, with a dangerous luster in her eyes. Qin Feng was slightly shocked. He was a little reckless. The other party was a true second on the ambitious person list. He was taking advantage of the situation and trying to extort her. After all, there were not many heaven-level battle skills. They were all explosive. How could a sex legacy treasure be taken out so easily? However, there was no change in his expression. Since he had already said it, he could not show the slightest intention of backing down. Heaven-level battle skill? You're quite ambitious. Su Yu said with a smile that was not a smile. No way. The heaven-level battle skill can increase my battle strength. Want to be helpful to you guys? Qin Feng spread his hands. You can burn the blood-refining gate, kill Xue Qing, and contend with Zhou Ji. I don't think you don't have a battle skill of this level. Only a higher-level heaven-level battle skill can allow you to achieve this at the peak of the half-step heaven level. Su Yu looked at Qin Feng with a smile. She licked her lips with her pink tongue. To be honest, I'm very tempted too. Qin Feng subconsciously clenched his fists. He smiled faintly and said, I think Palace Master Su cares more about the survival of the vast Chill Temple. Say, if the overlord of the fighting beasts erupts here, are you confident that you can easily suppress it? Su Yu squinted her beautiful eyes. She paused for a moment and said, If I'm strong, the vast Chill Temple will be strong too. A rare heaven-level battle skill should be able to allow me to reach a higher level. Palace Master Su, I naturally dare not doubt your strength. Qin Feng shook his head and crossed his fingers. He suddenly changed the topic. Palace Master Su, why do you think I dare to enter the vast chill temple and make such a request? Su squinted her eyes and stared at Qin Feng indifferently. Ha! I just said that Su can't kill me. Similarly, I don't think you can kill me too. Moreover, in this world, only I can make the green-scaled monster erupt with a stronger power. Since you know that I burned down the blood-refining gate, you should know why I did it. The green-scale monster was forced to transform and couldn't unleash its full power. However, I can make her transform willingly. Qin Feng smiled and did not say anything else. It would be better to give appropriate pointers to such a smart person and let her think about the pros and cons herself. This was the truth. In the past, when the flower explosion fully transformed, she could fight against a third heaven-level powerhouse. However, in the beast fighting arena, she was forced to transform and could not unleash her full power. Of course, if it was not a life-threatening situation, he would not want to see this scene. This was because every time the flower explosion transformed, she would be covered in scars. He could not bear to see that happen. The reason why he said this was to make Su Yu wary. Qin Feng did not think that Su Yu, who was able to muddle her way to her current position in Sin City, was an easy person to talk to or fool. Kindness and evil, killing and letting go, were all in her mind. A second ago, she could happily talk about cooperation with you, but once she felt that her interests were violated, she could be filled with killing intent in the next second. He had to increase the bargaining chip on his side. Chapter 562. Discussion. Su Yu stared seriously at Qin Feng. A moment later, she suddenly smiled and said, "You're indeed an interesting person. I can afford a heaven gray battle skill, but are you sure your help is worth the price? I can stop those below the 8th rank on the ambitious person list. Of course, I won't do it in a group fight." Qin Feng glanced at Su Yu and said indifferently, "Palace Master Su, you should know that it's better to have one more friend than one more enemy." Su Yu thought for a moment and said, "How confident are you?" If Qin Feng could really stop those above the 8th rank on the ambitious person list, it would greatly reduce the pressure on them. She could ignore those people, but she had to think about her sisters in the vast chill hall. Once she was held back by Su Yin, she would not be able to help them. Qin Feng grinned, revealing 2 rows of white teeth when he saw the doubt on Su Yu's pretty face. 100%. When Qin Feng's soft voice sounded out, Su Yu descended into silence. It was a long while before she finally lifted her head. She mused for a moment and said, "If you are really confident, it is not impossible for me to give you a heaven-class battle skill." To Su Yu, although a heaven-tier combat skill was very precious, it was not like her Guanghan Palace could not afford it. If Qin Feng was like what he said, he would be able to stop Zhou Hin and the other formidable characters at the bottom of the rankings. It could be said that he had solved a big problem for her Guanghan Palace and even avoided the crisis of destruction. Compared to the vast chill hall, a heaven gray battle skill was obviously not enough. Therefore, it was not impossible to give it to him. Qin Feng raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw Su Yu make a decision without thinking for a long time, as expected of a place where danger and opportunity coexisted. The vast chill hall's power was undoubtedly inferior to the few first-rate factions in Great Yin City. If they were in Great Yin City, they would only be comparable to some second-rate forces. However, such a force could easily take out a heaven-tier combat skill. This was no longer a matter of boldness, but a matter of foundation. Of course, this did not mean that the clans in Great Yin City were weak. It was mainly because they were located in a remote area and did not have many dangerous and complicated environments. The development of their forces was also limited to that area. However, Sin City was different. The flow of people here was complicated, and the flow of people was strong. The complicated environment made this place even more dangerous and uncertain than the peaceful Great Yin City. As the saying goes, opportunities are often accompanied by dangers. Sin City was the best example. The Guanghan Palace might not have produced any super powerhouses since its establishment, But surviving in a place that could be destroyed at any time had given them more benefits than those forces that had developed in a peaceful environment. Therefore, even though the Guanghan Palace did not have any top-notch experts like the leaders of the various major forces, the foundation that it possessed was something that some of the more powerful forces could not compare to. This is the Demon Wind Slash. It's a heaven-tier combat skill. Suyu stared at Qin Feng with her beautiful eyes. Her slender fingers flickered, and a white scroll appeared in a flash. She handed it to Qin Feng and pouted. "What do you mean by improving your combat strength so that you can help us better? I know that you just want some benefits. Do you think that a heaven-tier combat skill is like those ordinary combat skills that can be cultivated in 3 to 5 days? However, I won't argue with you. In short, it's fine as long as you do what you promised me. I won't force you to do anything else." When Qin Feng heard this, he only smiled faintly and did not say anything. He naturally knew that a heaven-tier combat skill was not that easy to cultivate, so he did not make any promises. He was about to enter the White Treasure Mountain. As for whether he could cultivate this heaven-tier combat skill during this period of time, he could only do his best and leave it to fate. If he could, it would naturally be excellent. After all, a heaven-tier combat skill was extraordinary and could increase his combat strength by a lot. It did not matter if he failed. In any case, he had already obtained it. He had plenty of time. In short, he only profited from this transaction. Thinking that he had obtained a heaven-tier combat skill that would make others jealous, Qin Feng could not help but grin. Suyu looked at him with disdain. This was simply a poor boy who had just entered the city. Everything was new to him. In short, I've already given you what you wanted. Don't forget what you promised me. Suyu reminded him with a cold gaze. You should know that not everyone can be deceived. That's natural. Qin Feng nodded and smiled. I still understand the principle of taking someone's money and eliminating their misfortune. Moreover, if Suyi loses the restraint of the Guanghan Palace, I'm afraid that his next target will be me. Suyu blinked her eyes and quickly regained her wits. She understood that she had been tricked by this brat. Her rosy lips parted as she said, "You little brat, you're deliberately tricking me, right? No matter what, that dimple will not let you off. You know this in your heart. You purposely spoke so casually just now because you want to obtain something good from me, right? If you think that I've tricked you, then I can't do anything about it." Qin Feng shrugged noncommittally. His hand movements were extremely nimble. Before Su Yu could react, he had already put away the heaven-tier combat skill. Su Yu's peach blossom eyes narrowed as a dangerous light flashed past. She looked at the calm face of Qin Feng in front of her and paused for a moment before softly saying, "What you did was not wise. Or are you underestimating my character? There are not many good people on the ambitious person list." Perhaps. Qin Feng did not mind the trace of coldness in Su Yu's words and smiled. His eyes met hers as he softly said, "Although I have taken advantage of this cooperation, just as I said, even without your Guanghan Palace restraining Su Yi, he may not be able to keep me here. It's just that I will have to pay a price that I don't want to pay. But to your Guanghan Palace, this is a matter of life and death. I think that a heaven-tier battle skill can be considered a pretty good deal for you." Hearing this, Su Yu blinked her eyes. Although she was angry at Qin Feng's words, she did not have any words to refute. After all, she could not find a capable assistant in a short period of time. Qin Feng could control the green-scale monster and had the ability to help them. Therefore, even if he asked for an exorbitant price, she could not do anything. After all, she could not force him. Moreover, she had a feeling that being on good terms with this mysterious young man might be a good karma. So in the end, your Guanghan Palace is not at a disadvantage, Qin Feng said with a serious face. His delicate appearance made it difficult for people to dislike him. Su Yu stared at Qin Feng. A moment later, she did not know whether to laugh or cry as she shook her head. She never imagined that she, a veteran who had been in Sin City for many years, would one day be led by the nose by a young brat. If news of this were spread, many people would laugh their heads off. Su Yu, who was completely under the control of Qin Feng, could only smile bitterly to hide her helplessness and depression. Seeing her defeated look, Qin Feng smiled and changed the topic. I heard that the people from Taishan Academy are also here for the two Archean remains. It's not just because of that. Suyu rolled her eyes at Qin Feng. Her tone was a little angry as she said, one of the female students even said that they were the ones who found the two Archean remains and that they should be the ones to deal with them. No one else should interfere. Sigh. Although these people are a little troublesome, in Sin City, not many people will be afraid of their identity, Suyu sighed softly. There was not much fear in her tone. Taishan Academy is known as one of the 4 super academies. It's not good to offend them, Qin Feng said. Huh. Do they really think that they can be so arrogant just because they're students from Taishan Academy? In other places, many people might be afraid of them, but here, not many people will pay attention to them. If they really push us too far, we don't mind letting them know that the name of a formidable person is not just for show. Suyu sneered. At this time, the aura of the second on the formidable person list slowly spread out. Chapter 563. Marching into Baibao Mountain after Suyu left, Qin Feng's face gradually turned solemn. Obviously, the current situation was not as easy as he had said. He was confident that he could deal with the top 10 on the ambitious person list. However, he was not confident that he could restrain Zhou Ji, who had touched the barrier of the second heaven stage. After all, he did not know much about this person, and his real combat strength had yet to be verified. Moreover, there was another layer of enmity between him and Su Yi. Once he knew that Yi Shiwen was the murderer of his brother, the situation would be different. There was also Shui Wuchang of the blood-refining sect. Even if he did not see his face clearly, Qin Feng believed that he would be able to recognize him as long as he was close enough. This was going to be troublesome. Qin Feng clenched his fists tightly as he felt a great pressure. The main reason was that he had made too many enemies. After a long while, Qin Feng lightly exhaled, and his tightly clenched fists also loosened. The fear in his eyes instantly disappeared, and a sharp aura that was like the edge of a blade was emitted. He had not been on a safe path. The dangers he had encountered were more severe than this, but he still managed to survive them. This time, he was still confident. Slowly calming down, Qin Feng took out the heaven-rank combat skill that Suyu had given him, Demon Wind Slash. This was the first heaven-rank combat skill that he had come into contact with. If he could cultivate it in the shortest time possible, it would greatly increase his combat strength. If he encountered them, he would have more confidence. Kiki, you're really black-hearted. We're obviously cooperating, but you still managed to extort a heaven-rank combat skill. Mo Yin laughed. Qin Feng shrugged. He did not have this intention at first. He just wanted to meet Suyu. However, later on, he felt that it was more beneficial for the cooperation to work together. Extorting a heaven-rank combat skill was just a spur of the moment. If you don't give it to me, I'll have to find a way myself. The night passed slowly as Qin Feng painstakingly studied the heaven-rank combat skill. The next day, the sky was blue and cloudless. The sun was warm, but not scorching. Occasionally, a gentle breeze would blow past, taking away the hustle and bustle of Sin City. It made people feel refreshed. Today was an important day in Sin City. Ever since the first ray of sunlight broke through the shackles of the earth and shone on the land, people began to appear on the quiet streets. Most of them were individual cultivators. Some of them formed groups of 2 or 3 to look after each other as they entered the White Treasure Mountain. Because everyone was a loose cultivator, they did not have much preparation, and there were no rules to restrict them, so they could enter directly. As for some forces, they needed to gather their people. Their speed was a little slow compared to those rogue cultivators. However, these forces didn't show any signs of impatience. Obviously, everyone knew that it wasn't a matter of first come, first serve. Here, the things would belong to whoever had the harder fist. There was only one rule. Whoever was more powerful would be the rule. With this integration, when the sun gradually rose to its peak, most of the forces and families finally began to enter the White Treasure Mountain. In a large courtyard in the center of Sin City, the Guanghan Temple was also selecting people. During this preparation, Suyu finally decided on the lineup that the Guanghan Hall would be mobilizing this time. The number of people in the lineup was not large, but they were all carefully selected. Almost all of the most elite forces of the Guanghan Hall were mobilized. This time, Suyu would naturally be leading the team to enter the White Treasure Mountain to compete for the ancient remnant. At this time, Qin Feng finally understood why the Guanghan Temple had stood tall for so many years. Aside from Suyu, whose strength was unknown, there were two other heavenly realm cultivators standing behind Suyu. Behind them were some women who were half a step into the 9th level heaven realm. Qin Feng sensed that nearly 10 of them had reached this level. The total number of people in the Guanghan Temple was less than 50, but their overall strength wasn't weak. Even the weakest person was at the late stage of the spirit detecting realm. Looking at Suyu, who was organizing the people in an orderly manner, Qin Feng secretly nodded. No wonder she was ranked second on the list of ruthless heroes. Her methods and style were indeed worthy of praise. The White Treasure Mountain was filled with danger, and no one knew what kind of terrifying dangers were hidden within. Under such circumstances, it was obviously extremely unwise to mobilize a large number of people to rush in recklessly. As such, for this trip, it was naturally more important to choose quality over quantity. Among the crowd, Ren Shi's eyes wandered and finally saw Qin Feng and the big explosion in a corner. She immediately revealed a playful smile, her rosy little mouth opening and closing as if to say, "Be careful." Qin Feng smiled at her and nodded slightly. On the high platform at the front of these people was a beautiful woman with a graceful figure. The gazes of the other women were filled with respect and admiration when they looked at her. The only person who could have such a position in the Guanghan Palace was naturally Suyu. Today, Suyu was wearing a red soft armor. The soft armor clung tightly to her body, outlining her fiery, sexy curves. Her slightly curly hair fell to her waist, causing her to appear somewhat charming. However, between her brows, there was a trace of valiance that was not inferior to a man's. When this kind of charm and valiance were combined, the charm that was emitted would definitely cause the hearts of many men to beat unceasingly. Women are indeed fickle. Looking at Suyu, who was completely different from last night, Qin Feng muttered in his heart, "This time, we are only entering the White Treasure Mountain for the Spirit Beast descendants. Try not to get entangled with other forces. If you meet someone you can't beat, immediately retreat." Suyu looked at the women below and paused for a moment before softly saying, "I will only say one thing. Safety first. As for the Spirit Beast descendants, if fate allows it, then it can't be forced. Now let's go." Suyu waved her hand, and the dozens of selected elites majestically headed towards the White Treasure Mountain. The Guanghan Temple obviously had a high status and reputation in Sin City. Therefore, when they set out, they immediately attracted the attention of most people. Of course, they were able to attract so many people's attention mostly because they were all young and beautiful women. With so many people gathered together, it was like 100 flowers were blooming. Naturally, it attracted a lot of attention. Of course, most of these gazes fell on the figure at the front. Their eyes were filled with love and passion. However, when the figure's eyes swept past them, they immediately lowered their heads and restrained the feelings in their eyes. Looking at the towering mountain range in the distance, Qin Feng's eyes surged with a trace of passion. He was also very interested in this mysterious mountain range that was rumored to contain a supreme treasure. This time, would he find a treasure, or would he be lucky enough to obtain an archaic remains? Chapter 564. A stunning move after entering Baobao Mountain. The group of people who were dizzy from the scorching noon sun were stimulated by the cool and refreshing feeling and immediately became much more clear-headed. This cool and refreshing feeling was much more comfortable than the outside, which was like being baked in a furnace. As they went deeper into the mountain, some of the small conversations gradually quieted down. Apart from the light footsteps and the creaking of branches being stepped on, The group of dozens of people did not make a single sound. Looking at this scene, Qin Feng could not help but sigh. As expected of the Guanghan Temple's most elite troops, this kind of quality was almost comparable to some of the veterans. These people were not gathered together, but were separated from each other by a certain distance. However, they were communicating with each other through their eyes. With a simple action, the other party could immediately understand and distinguish whether there was danger from each other's eyes and gestures. This kind of cooperation was quite tacit. It was unknown whether Suyu did it intentionally or not, but she placed Qin Feng and the big explosive flower at the very end. This position seemed to be the safest, but in reality, only veterans who had been in the jungle for a long time knew that this position was the most dangerous. Some spirit beasts that had yet to develop intelligence were unable to distinguish whether the enemy was strong or not. Therefore, these spirit beasts would usually pounce and bite the intruders when they saw them, and most of them would end up in the most miserable state. However, spirit beasts that had just developed intelligence were different. They already had initial intelligence and had the ability to think. These spirit beasts were usually more troublesome to deal with because they were not like spirit beasts that had yet to develop intelligence and only knew how to kill. When they encountered an intruder, most of them would choose to hibernate and hide on the side, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The most suitable place for them to strike was usually the very end of the group. This was because, according to the normal arrangement, the closer one was to the very end of the group, the weaker one would be. Moreover, a person's back was the easiest place to launch a sneak attack. Even if the sneak attack failed, it was the most convenient place to escape. Generally, veteran hunters or mercenaries would leave the stronger ones at the very end of the group. It was commonly known as the tail guard and the rear guard. The most important positions in a group were at the very front and the very back. As long as one of these two positions was broken, it would easily affect the morale of the group and cause the group to collapse faster. Since Suyu knew this arrangement, she was obviously very experienced in this area. Qin Feng didn't reject this arrangement of hers. After all, he had taken her heaven-rank combat skill, and he indeed ought to bear some responsibility. He patted the sky, splitting axe on his shoulder, and walked slowly, leaving a line of deep footprints on the slightly damp ground. In the quiet forest, a large group of people walked quietly. Pairs of vigilant eyes constantly scanned the dark places in the surrounding trees. Their hands tightly gripped the weapons at their waists, ready to deal with any unexpected situation at any time. Wiping the sweat off his face, Qin Feng raised his head and looked at the dark forest. It had been 2 hours since he entered the White Treasure Mountain. During this time, nothing unexpected had happened, which made him a little puzzled. His spiritual perception was slightly stronger than ordinary people's, and he had a special sense of danger. This allowed him to keenly sense that there were quite a number of spirit beasts on this White Treasure Mountain. But until now, they had not encountered any ambushes. Unable to figure this out, Qin Feng shook his head and retracted his gaze. Once again, he walked with heavy steps towards the depths of the White Treasure Mountain. However, not long after Qin Feng's doubts were dispelled, a small-scale attack by spirit beasts appeared in front of him. However, the women of the Guanghan Palace were all well-trained and agile. Before Qin Feng could make a move, the attack had been extinguished. As they went deeper into the mountain, the attacks of the spirit beasts became more powerful. Several times, even Suyu had to take action. After killing 2 spirit beasts in the early stage of the 6th rank, which caused a huge shock, the frequency of the beast attacks decreased. When she made a move, Qin Feng also knew how powerful this woman was. Her spiritual power was like a vast ocean. Compared to her, he was simply a small stream. When will I have such powerful spiritual power? Qin Feng bitterly sighed in his heart. As a spiritual power master, he knew how difficult it was to cultivate spiritual power. Now, he didn't even have the face to call himself a spiritual power master. Boom! Suddenly, a low roar rang out. A fiery red shadow rushed out from the bushes at the back of the group. Its body was covered in rough scales that emitted a cold light. There were 2 sharp and hard antennae on its head. Its bloody mouth was filled with fangs. Under the illumination of the light, a chilling light flashed. It's a 6th-level spirit beast, the Earth Mountain Armor. Many people's expressions changed drastically when they felt the enormous pressure, especially the few women who were right under the Earth Mountain Armadillo's bloody mouth. They were so scared that their faces turned pale and their bodies trembled. They were only at the spirit detecting realm. Under the attack of the Earth Mountain Armor, which was comparable to a half-step peak spirit beast, there was no way for them to survive. Seeing this situation, the 2 divine realm women beside Suyu's face changed. They wanted to help, but because of the sudden attack and the distance between them, they couldn't do anything. They could only watch as the women were about to die in the Earth Mountain Armor's mouth. On the other hand, Suyu's expression didn't change. Her beautiful eyes were filled with anticipation as she stared at Qin Feng, who was right in front of the Earth Mountain Armor. When he sensed Suyu's gaze, Qin Feng helplessly shook his head. In the next instant, the smile on his face suddenly disappeared. A ferocious look suddenly surfaced on his face. He took a step forward and appeared beside the ground mountain armor, after which he lifted the sky-splitting axe and circulated his strength to the maximum. After which, he heavily smashed the axe onto the ground mountain armor's huge body. Boom! Visible waves of air emitted from the Earth Mountain Armor's hard scales. A roar of pain came from the Earth Mountain Armor's hideous mouth. Crack! A crisp sound rang out. Everyone was shocked to see that a crack had suddenly appeared on the hard scales. Then, the crack grew larger and more numerous. In just a few breaths of time, the hard shell of the Earth Mountain Armadillo shattered like a mirror and fell to the ground. Roar! The hard shell was shattered and blood spurted out. The Earth Mountain Armor roared in pain and moved its limbs, trying to escape. However, in the next moment, the sky-splitting axe fell again with a fierce wind. Poochie! The sky-splitting axe fell, and an arrow of blood spurted out. The Earth Mountain Armor's head rolled to the ground. The Earth Mountain Armor, which was comparable to a half-step to peak, was killed in 2 moves. Everyone from the Guanghan Palace stared at the scene in shock. When their gazes turned to Qin Feng, who was holding the sky-splitting axe, the shock in their eyes slowly turned into horror. Even the 2 divine stage women were stunned. They looked at each other and saw a trace of seriousness in each other's eyes. Due to the Earth Mountain Armor's tough defense, even their attacks couldn't do anything to it. It was only at this moment that they finally understood why Big Sister Sue had ignored their objections and insisted that this young man be the last to go. It turned out that this young man was also a ruthless character. Based on the previous attack, they admitted that if they were in his place, they would not have done better than this young man. Big Sister Sue's eyes are sharp. The 2 of them sighed softly and looked at the young man who had attracted everyone's attention. The contempt and disdain in their eyes had disappeared and were replaced with true respect and respect. Suyu laughed softly. Her peach blossom eyes flashed with an inexplicable light, and her small round mouth curled into an inexplicable arc. From the looks of it, her heaven-tier battle skill was not wasted. Qin Feng could naturally sense the mixed emotions in the surrounding gazes. His expression was slightly unnatural. After all, being stared at by so many beautiful women, no matter how thick-skinned he would still feel a little uncomfortable. However, he quickly hid this unnatural feeling and smiled. There was no arrogance or pride in his smile. He took a step forward. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, the Earth Mountain Armor's body quickly shrank. Its blood was completely devoured by Qin Feng. Chapter 565. Su Yi appears, the sky gradually darkened, and the surrounding towering trees made the whole mountain forest even darker. At this time, their vision was blurred, and it was not suitable for them to continue moving forward. After finding a relatively open place, the team began a rest. A few of the stronger and more experienced women spread out to guard the surroundings. The others sat where they were, recovering the spiritual energy they had consumed from the large number of battles. Some of the weaker ones, who had less experience in battles, began to set up camp and start a fire. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Everyone went into the tent to rest. After going through a long period of battle, the high-intensity concentration, once relaxed in this situation, sleepiness and fatigue would double. Under the double pressure of mind and body, these people quickly fell asleep. Night fell, and everything fell asleep. The whole world seemed to be quiet all of a sudden. The whole camp was quiet, and only the bonfires swayed with the wind, as if dancing. Without the illumination of the sun, the whole mountain forest seemed even colder and darker. The silver moon hanging high in the sky brought a trace of silver to the mountain forest. The lush branches stretched out, and under the bright moonlight, they looked like ferocious beasts baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Qin Feng sat quietly beside the bonfire, squinting his eyes, looking at the crackling branches. No one knew what he was thinking. After a period of silence, he sighed softly. Just as he was about to get up and leave, a fiery red figure with a wisp of fragrance came to his face. Qin Feng raised his head slightly and saw Suyu opposite him, her bright eyes and white teeth, and her cheeks were smiling. Under the contrast of the bonfire, she exuded a strange charm. Beside the bonfire, the two figures sat facing each other. For a while, no one spoke. After a long while, Suyu sighed softly. Her peach blossom eyes stared at Qin Feng with a strange emotion, and then she looked at the sky-splitting axe. This axe of yours seems to be a bit unusual. After looking at it for a while, she did not find anything special. Suyu raised her head and asked, "What's different about this big stone?" Qin Feng chuckled and stood up. Just as he was about to grab her, Suyu stopped him with a smile. "I still want to see what's so strange about this thing. You won't be so stingy, right?" Suyu stared at the sky-splitting axe on the ground with great interest and said with a smile, "Huh." Hearing this, Qin Feng was slightly taken aback. Then, he nodded with a smile and took a step back. His eyes contained a hint of ridicule. Suyu rubbed her snow-white hands and clenched her fists. Then, she tightly grasped the stone axe. She lightly exhaled and casually tugged at it. Following this tug, Suyu's expression slightly changed. She exclaimed in surprise. She realized that the weight of the stone axe did not seem to match its size at all. "Good heavens, it's quite heavy," Suyu muttered in astonishment. Her arms tightened. Veins popped out on her white arms. Tightly grasping the stone axe, Suyu's face slowly turned red. She softly shouted, "Up!" As her voice faded, Suyu's arms trembled slightly as she slowly moved it up. Then she held it in front of her with both hands and vigorously waved it left and right. When she looked at Qin Feng again, there was a faint trace of shock. You've been carrying this thing all this time?" Looking at Qin Feng's smiling face, Suyu suddenly said with a dry mouth, "Heavens, even she could not bear the weight of this thing, let alone others. It was already good enough to be able to carry it." Seeing Suyu's shocked expression, Qin Feng smiled and nodded slightly. People who touched a stone axe for the first time all had the same expression. Thinking back, he used a few months to get used to this kind of power. It took a few years for him to be able to feel the weightless feeling in his hands. His hand took the sky-splitting axe and then casually inserted it into his back. Her eyes were fixed on Qin Feng's movements. Suyu discovered that when he took the stone axe, Qin Feng's hand actually sank a little and completely endured its power. Suyu's mouth was slightly open. After a while, she shook her head in amazement. "Little guy, you're amazing. No wonder you smashed through the Earth Pangolin's defense." Qin Feng smiled and did not speak. "I really didn't expect you to like such a perverted training method." Suyu's beautiful eyes stared at Qin Feng as she sighed. Not everyone could endure carrying weight for a long time. At least in the aspect of mental energy, she definitely did not like to torture herself like this. It could also be said that people only focused on the cultivation of spiritual energy. In their view, this was the foundation of strength. As for the physical body, they did not pay much attention. For Qin Feng to be able to go against the heaven realm, it probably had something to do with his extraordinary fleshly body. Without an indestructible physical body, it was impossible to wield this stone axe like an arm. It was impossible to defeat the Earth Pangolin with 2 axes without using spiritual energy. His strength and freedom were his principles. Qin Feng smiled slightly, reached out to touch his master, and smiled faintly. If you want to be stronger than others, you have to put in more effort than others. Otherwise, why do you think I was confident that I could defeat Zhou Ji? Suyu heard this and was silent for a while. Her peach blossom eyes flashed slightly. Although Qin Feng said it casually, the hard work behind it was probably only he himself knew. If you want to get something, you have to learn to pay for it. This was an eternal truth. You have a strength beyond your level. You do have your reasons. Suyu nodded. Qin Feng was just about to speak when his face suddenly changed. At the same time, the smile on Suyu's pretty face disappeared in an instant, and a touch of coldness surged up. The two of them looked at each other, and in the next moment, they both disappeared. In the dark forest, towering trees covered the sky and the sun. The intertwining branches were like a code, as if the forest was isolated from the outside world. In the darkness, faint moonlight shone through the branches, forming speckles. One of the beams of light that shone and was quite large. Moving along the beam of light, a figure quietly stood on a tree trunk. He slightly raised his head, facing the light. His line of sight shot through the obstruction of the branches and leads to the endless starry sky outside. A moment later, he withdrew his line of sight and slowly lowered his head, revealing a young and handsome face. His face was exceptionally handsome, and his skin was as smooth as jade. His eyes were a strange purplish-gray color, and his gaze was deep, surging with an unknown luster. This was a very charming face, but it was excessively fair and lacked the masculinity that a man should have. Instead, it had a hint of femininity. The young man slightly lowered his head. A moment later, he suddenly raised his head and looked in a certain direction. He whispered softly, "They're here." As the man's voice fell, the branches in the distance swayed a few times, and 2 figures flashed on the tree trunk. With the faint moonlight, the man looked at the beautiful woman in the distance with a slightly cold face. A touch of imperceptible surprise flashed across his eyes. A moment later, he softly laughed. "Suyu, long time no see." Suyu stared at the man's face, and a chill surged on her charming face. After a long while, she softly spat out 2 words from between her teeth. Chapter 566. Cooperation, Suyi. Suyu's voice wasn't too soft, so these 2 words clearly passed into Qin Feng's ears. His expression changed slightly as he looked at the figure in the distance with a dignified gaze. This person was very young, looking no more than 25 or 26 years old. His face was pale, his eyes were purplish-gray, and the corner of his mouth held an inexplicable smile. His entire person seemed a bit evil. This was Qin Feng's first impression of Suyi. Qin Feng stared at Suyi with a dignified expression. The peerless figure ranked 3rd on the list of ambitious heroes began to circulate the spirit energy in his body. This person didn't have any spirit energy fluctuations, but Qin Feng felt a great pressure from this person. This kind of pressure was close to death. Even Suyu, who was ranked 1 place higher than him, didn't give him this kind of feeling. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that Suyu didn't have any other thoughts about him. After all, the list of ambitious heroes placed great emphasis on actual combat. Suyu was able to suppress Suyi, so her strength was definitely not weaker than his. It was just that Suyi was more low-key than him. While Qin Feng was secretly sizing up Suyi, the other party's gaze was always on Suyu. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even look at him. Suyu's gaze was as sharp as ice as she stared at Suyi. At this time, compared to before, her aura had obviously changed a lot. There was no indifference or charm, only endless frost that gave people a great sense of oppression. The one who felt it the most was Qin Feng. Although Suyu's aura wasn't directed at him, he still felt a lot of pressure. This was killing intent, a strong killing intent. At this moment, the aura of a true ambitious hero, Suyu, was completely revealed. Worthy of being ranked 2nd on the list of ambitious heroes, Just this killing intent alone is enough to make some ninth stage heavenly realm masters unable to bear it. Qin Feng sighed his heart and gained a new understanding of her. However, Su Yi merely smiled faintly in the face of Su Yu's unconcealed killing intent. He did not take it to heart at all. He looked at the cold and indifferent yet exquisite beautiful face. The amazement in his eyes was slowly withdrawn under the latter's ice-cold gaze. Exchanging blows with the students of Taishin Academy, you have gained a lot of insights, but you still haven't broken through that barrier. Su Yi looked at Su Yu and laughed softly. Aren't you the same? Su Yu said coldly. That's right. This stage is indeed very difficult to break through. The corners of Su Ye's mouth gradually curled into a sinister smile. He licked his lips and laughed in a low voice. However, if I get my hands on you, I'm afraid I'll instantly make a breakthrough. Shameless. Su Yu's pretty face was ice-cold as she coldly shouted. After dealing with him for so many years, she naturally knew what Su Yu was thinking. Shameless? On the path of cultivation, there is no such thing as shameless or not. There is only the difference between the strong and the weak. Everyone has a cultivation method that suits them. There are 3,000 great ways, and each one is different. Who can say that they are noble? Su Yi shook his head and laughed. The reason is determined by the strong. Right and wrong are also determined by the strong. I never think that I'm shameless. I'm just pursuing the path that suits me. With a smile, Su Ye's eyes suddenly became fiery. He stared at Su Yu with a burning gaze, and there was a trace of blazing passion in the depths of his eyes. Su Yu, now we are both in the critical period of breaking through. I've told you that you are different from the women in the past. My dual cultivation method is beneficial to both of us. As long as we combine, not only will it be beneficial to me, but it will also be beneficial to you. It can even help you directly break through that barrier. As long as we both break through, we don't have to fear that guy anymore. At the end of his words, Su Ye's face gradually surged with excitement and madness. However, Su Yu only responded with an even colder expression. I knew that this would be the result. Looking at the beautiful face that was like 10,000 years old ice, the blazing passion in Su Ye's eyes gradually disappeared. He smiled bitterly. Just as Su Yu knew his character, he also knew Su Yu's temperament. Su Yu stared coldly at Su Yi. A brilliance flashed between her jade fingers, and two delicate light blue, full moon scimitars flashed out. Coupled with her cold and arrogant posture, and the tight fiery red armor wrapped around her body, it made her feel more valiant and formidable. Su Yi, if you came here today just to say these words to me, then you don't have to. Su Yu pointed the tip of the scimitars at Su Yi and said in a cold tone. On the tip of the scimitars, a cold light surged. In addition to being dazzling, there was also an extremely fierce oppression. Looking at the hostile Su Yi shook his head and did not move. He just smiled faintly and said, You came to White Treasure Mountain for the two surviving species spiritual beasts, right? Aren't you? Su Yi sneered and asked, Don't talk nonsense. Tell me your purpose. Su Yi smiled and was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he muttered, What do you think of the students of Imperial Mystery Academy? Su Yi frowned and did not say anything. Imperial Mystery Academy has a transcendent status on this mainland. The students there are all extraordinary, Su Yi said. Su Yin continued to talk to himself. When he reached this point, he suddenly paused. He looked at Su Yu as a somewhat solemn expression surfaced on his face. He said, Among those 3 students, 2 of them are not inferior to us in the slightest. At that time, if we really fight, I'm afraid that none of us will be a match for them. Su Yu frowned and glanced at Su Yi, asking, What are you trying to say? Although there are many disagreements among us, and we often fight both openly and secretly, this is still an internal matter in Sin City. Now that there are foreign enemies invading, if we still act like before and fight on our own, when the time comes and the surviving species spiritual beasts are snatched away by a few foreign youths, we will become a laughingstock. Su Yi smiled faintly. You mean to say? Su Yu frowned slightly. Work together. Suyi nodded and smiled. Although everyone's goal is to get the surviving species' spiritual beasts, we must first settle our internal affairs before we fight against foreign enemies. If everyone is blinded by the benefits in front of them and fights on our own, I'm afraid that some people will take advantage of us when the time comes. Those students come from the same academy, so they are naturally united. Among us, none of the forces can deal with them alone. As long as we get rid of them first, we will have a chance to obtain the surviving species' spiritual beasts. As for who the surviving species' spiritual beasts belong to, it will all depend on our own abilities. Suyi smiled. Hearing this, Suyu fell silent. Suyi did not disturb her and looked at Suyu with a smile on his face. There was not the slightest bit of worry on his face as he knew the latter's final choice. After a moment of silence, Suyu took a deep breath and raised her head to look at Suyi. She asked seriously, if we join forces, we can naturally force those students to retreat. However, since they dared to come, it's impossible that they didn't think of this. Do you think that they won't have a backup plan? Chapter 567. Recognition. Before looking for you, I also joined forces with some other people. Our cooperation is a kind of alliance. We won't chase them away as soon as we see them, but rather, we will prevent them from attacking us one by one. So he paused for a moment before continuing with a smile. We have an agreement. As long as those students attack any one of us, the other parties will help. Since the two descendants have escaped to Baibao Mountain, they are now in Sin City's territory. We can't possibly let some outsiders obtain them. Wouldn't that make people laugh their heads off and say that Sin City is useless? Suyu frowned as she stared at Suyi. After a long while, she withdrew her gaze and said indifferently, "Who did you ally with?" Hearing this, Suyi smiled. He knew that Suyu had passed this round. As for the latter's question, he only smiled and did not say anything. At least if we join forces, it won't be a problem to deal with those students. Hearing Su Yan's vague answer, Suyu frowned in dissatisfaction. However, she did not say anything. She only coldly said, "I will consider the alliance you mentioned. However, I warn you, you better be serious. If I find out that you have ulterior motives, Suyu, will make you lose the qualification to fight for it, even if I have to do my best." At the end of her sentence, Suyu's voice was extremely cold. An extremely strong aura slowly spread out from her body, causing the air to tremble. Suye's eyes narrowed slightly. Soon after, he smiled and shook his head. "You and I have fought for so many years. Don't you know my character? It is precisely because I know that I have to warn you in advance." Suyu curled her lips and said indifferently. However, her expression eased a lot. Hearing this, Suyi smiled. He knew that Suyu had agreed to the alliance. His gaze suddenly turned and landed on Qin Feng. His gaze was slightly strange as he said, "This little brother should be the newcomer that Zhou Ji mentioned." Qin Feng smiled faintly and nodded. Looking at the calm Qin Feng beside Suyu, Suye's gaze narrowed for a moment. He rubbed his forehead and said in a low voice, "Huh." Looking at his expression, it seems that he has suffered a loss at your hands. He is really not simple. I was just lucky. Qin Feng smiled faintly. Luck and luck are both part of one's strength. Suyi chuckled softly. It seems that you have some skill to be able to make Zhou Ji suffer. Qin Feng shrugged, neither admitting nor denying it. What? Do you want to avenge him? Suyu asked coldly. At the same time, she moved closer to Qin Feng. Hearing this, Suyi laughed involuntarily. He shook his head and said, "If you were to fight, I might have to spar with you." As for him, at this point Suyu suddenly paused, and then he smiled. If I had to stand up for everyone, then his 8th place on the formidable person list would be wasted. Pick yourself up from where you fall. He told me that I don't have to worry about this. Suyi smiled and shifted his gaze to Qin Feng again. He smiled and said, "He said that he will come to you personally to settle the grudge between you two." Hearing this, Qin Feng raised his eyebrows, but his expression did not change. He smiled and said, "I'll be waiting, but I personally hope that you won't die at his hands." Suyi paused and smiled. After all, There's another layer of relationship between you and me. It's better to settle it myself. Hearing this, Qin Feng's expression froze. He narrowed his eyes. You already knew? Su Yi smiled and withdrew his gaze. He looked at Su Yu and said, since we have made things clear, I hope that we can help each other when the time comes. As for who the remnant spirit beast belongs to, it will depend on your luck. Of course. Su Wanyu nodded and did not stay any longer. The two of them quickly returned. The smile on Su Ye's face was slowly withdrawn as he watched the two figures disappear into the dense forest. He raised his head, and his purple-gray eyes carried a deep seriousness and fear. He looked at the dark black starry sky and immediately sighed softly that could not be heard. I wonder if that guy came. The title of number 1 is terrifying. In the pitch-black forest, the two figures moved quickly. Along the way, other than the slight sound of wind breaking and the slight sound of feet stepping on tree trunks, there was no other movement. Do you think that Su Yi is trustworthy? Su Yu frowned and asked while moving quickly. Hearing this, Qin Feng looked at Su Yu in surprise. He shook his head and smiled. You asked the wrong question. I don't know anything about this person. How would I know his personality? Su Yu sighed and stopped on a tree trunk. Qin Feng landed beside her and looked at her without saying anything. I know that you don't know him. That's why I asked you. After a long while, Su Yu sighed faintly. She glanced at Qin Feng and said, tell me what you think of him. Unfathomable. His personality is treacherous. He is extremely shrewd. Qin Feng was silent for a while and said softly, then how trustworthy do you think his words are? Su Yu asked. 5. Qin Feng replied. 5? Su Yu was slightly surprised by Qin Feng's rating. She said, although I don't like this person, what he said is indeed the best way. Those 3 students are indeed very powerful, especially 2 of them. Even I don't have the confidence to deal with them. If we don't form an alliance, we don't have the ability to fight against them. We can only be defeated one by one. Hearing this, Qin Feng shook his head and said, that's not what I'm talking about. The alliance that Su Yi mentioned is very feasible. However, seeing that Su Yi was staring at him, Qin Feng paused and said softly, if we really go against those people, who will be the main force? You or Su Yi? Hearing Feng Chen's words, Su Wanyue was slightly startled and fell silent for a while. You should be clear about the background of those students. Do you really think that by joining forces, you can make them retreat? Looking at the silent Su Yu, Qin Feng continued, the students who can walk out of Taishin Academy are extremely arrogant. Even if they can't beat them, they will still fight with all their might. At that time, who in your alliance will really put in the effort? In front of the ownership of the surviving species, everyone wants to preserve their strength. At the same time, they want to deplete the strength of the other party. The battle with those people is a good opportunity to deplete the strength of the other party. At that time, if there is really a battle, I'm afraid that the people in your alliance will not use their full strength. An alliance with ulterior motives is only useful in intimidating others. In terms of actual combat, there is no advantage at all, because everyone wants to get the surviving species, and to get the surviving species, they must first deplete the strength of the other party, to preserve their strength. Chapter 568. The wind and the clouds listening to his analysis. Su Yu's pretty face became more and more solemn. A small part of the reason was because of Su Ye's plan, while the other part was because of Qin Feng. She did not expect that this seemingly harmless young man would be so meticulous. Even she had not thought of a problem for the time being, but he could analyze it so thoroughly. Looks like you're also someone with some experience. Su Yu smiled inexplicably. She knew in her heart that a person's talent and personality were not directly related. Qin Feng indeed had battle strength that surpassed his level on the surface, but this only proved that his talent was not bad. From what she saw now, this young man was meticulous, shrewd, and calm in the face of trouble. This was not something that could be possessed by having good talent. Only by experiencing some unforgettable experiences and being tempered by growth would one be able to accumulate such abilities. Obviously, This gentle and kind young man in front of her must have had extraordinary experiences. Huh, if I didn't understand anything, I'm afraid that I would have died somewhere long ago. Qin Feng smiled faintly. Suyu stared at Qin Feng with her beautiful eyes. After a long while, she sighed in her heart. She knew that Qin Feng was unwilling to say, and Suyu would not ask, who did not have their own secrets. Since it was a secret, who would easily reveal it, just like her. According to your analysis, what should we do next? Suyu asked. Do what we should do. If we don't form an alliance, we will definitely be ostracized. Since things have come to this, we can only take one step at a time. When the time comes, try to keep a low profile. Qin Feng said softly. Since things had come to this, they really had no other choice. The students of Imperial Mystery Academy were very strong, and Su and the rest were eyeing them covetously. In the face of absolute strength, any tricks were pale and powerless. Now, the best thing for them to do was to lay low and not stand out. By the way, do you have any grudges with Suyi in the past? Suyi suddenly asked. Qin Feng's heart skipped a beat, but he immediately smiled vaguely. It's all in the past. It's not worth mentioning. Suyu looked at him suspiciously, but she didn't continue to ask. Seeing that Suyu didn't ask any more questions, Qin Feng secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He was even more afraid of Suyi in his heart. Suyi had obviously recognized him, but he still treated him as an ordinary person. It could be seen that his shrewdness was not something an ordinary person could compare with. After returning to the camp, they did not speak for the entire night until dawn. When the first ray of sunlight shone in, everyone from the Guanghan Palace had already packed up and was ready to set off. As they got closer to the depths, everyone's faces became more and more dignified. Even Suyu's beautiful face became more and more cautious. At this stage, what they had to guard against was not just the sudden attack of the spirit beasts, but also the actions of others. After all, the temptation of the remnant spirit beasts was too great. Everyone wanted to exhaust the strength of others before discovering them. This was especially true for opponents like the Guanghan Palace, who had a rather strong lineup. Fortunately, the title of the second on the ambitious person list was somewhat intimidating. Along the way, they encountered many groups of people. There were bold individual cultivators who were skilled, but there were also groups of people who formed groups. However, after seeing Suyu, most of them suppressed the thoughts in their hearts. Of course, there were also some people who, after weighing the pros and cons, felt that there was no hope for them. They chose to follow a group that they felt had a strong lineup. At the same time, they could obtain protection and see if there were any other opportunities in the mountains. The Guanghan Palace was obviously a good choice. Not only could they admire the beauties, but they could also be in close contact with the number one beauty of Sin City, Suyu. It was both safe and enjoyable. Why not? Therefore, along the way, many people chose to seek refuge with the Guanghan Palace. In just half a day, the group that originally had less than 50 people. Now, it had developed to 80 or 90 people, and this number was still increasing. At the same time, Qin Feng also truly experienced the terror of Sin City. Among the more than 30 people who joined later, nearly 10 of them had reached the divine realm. This number could be said to be shocking. Since you have chosen to follow us, you have to be at ease. I guarantee that as long as you are sincere, the Guanghan Palace will not mistreat you. However, if anyone dares to have any other thoughts, don't blame me, Suyu, for not recognizing you. Obviously, Suyu did not completely trust these people. With a light shout, a strong spiritual power wrapped around her voice and spread out, causing many people to turn pale. Everyone quickly smiled apologetically and nodded. Even if they were given the courage, they would not dare to do anything in front of Suyu. Moreover, they all wanted to perform well in front of the beautiful girls of the Guanghan Palace. Perhaps if they performed well, they would be chosen by one of the beautiful girls and be able to settle their marriage. If someone was a little more outstanding and received Suyu's special attention, then he would be blessed for the rest of his life. Of course, this idea was only in everyone's mind. After all, that woman was not someone that anyone could take a fancy to. How many young talents had fallen under her soft red armor and tried their best. But in the end, they were still empty-handed. It was incomparably depressing. In the darkness, they could only think of that beautiful body and then move their five-finger mountains. Two remnant species spiritual beasts are in Wind Valley. Suddenly, this news was spread. In a short period of time, it quickly spread throughout the entire Baobao Mountain and caused a huge commotion. Groups of people and people who were hiding in the dark quickly moved towards Wind Valley. The originally quiet Baobao Mountain instantly became lively, and it became more and more intense. In a forest in the east, Su's purplish-gray eyes looked towards the direction of Wind Valley. When he heard the news from the person beside him, the corner of his mouth slowly curled up. The main event is about to begin. Brother Suya. Zhouji walked over with a gloomy face. That brat is currently in the Guanghan Palace. Su glanced at Zhouji and said softly, "When the time comes, you will have the chance to take revenge. Don't mess up my plans for now." When he heard this, Zhouji quickly nodded respectfully. His lowered eyes flashed with a dense killing intent. In another cave, a cultured and refined youth held a long sword in his hand. As the long sword trembled, a shocking sword intent soared into the sky. He looked towards the direction of Wind Valley and revealed a faint smile. "Zhuxia, this time, our rankings should be swapped." More than 10 miles away from Baobao Mountain, a few figures stood in the sky. Among them, 3 youths stood on swords, while an old man stood in the air. On his shoulders, there was a pair of wings formed by spiritual energy. As the wings flapped gently, they released an extremely terrifying energy. At the front was a handsome youth. His face was gentle and genial, and there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Just by standing there, he revealed a confident aura that seemed to look down on the world. Baobao Mountain is a very interesting place. The youth touched his chin with his hand, and a light surged in his deep eyes. TCH, aren't they just some hooligans in the marketplace? They still call themselves heroes. What's second and third place? Didn't they still get beaten by us? Behind the youth, a young girl with a delicate face said indifferently. Her beautiful face was filled with nobility and disdain. At the back of the 3, the old man slowly flapped his wings. His old eyes were filled with gratification as he looked at the 3 youths in front of him. He nodded slightly and said, "I won't get involved in what happens next. It's a matter for the younger generation." "Thank you, old Gu." The youth smiled. "Haha, there's no need to thank me. These are my people." The old man also smiled as he looked at the 3 youths. The smile on his old face was like a blooming chrysanthemum. However, he didn't drag his feet and directly descended to the ground. Chapter 569. A gathering of heroes. Windstream Valley was located in the deepest part of White Treasure Mountain. It was the most dangerous place in the entire White Treasure Mountain. There were herds of spiritual beasts, and most of them were powerful. There were also rumors that the treasure was in Windstream Valley. There was a rumor that an ancient tomb was buried under White Treasure Mountain. The entrance to the ancient tomb was rumored to be in Windstream Valley. However, no one had ever seen what the ancient tomb looked like. According to the records, there were people who had obtained good things and seen various strange phenomena. There were flowing black rivers and floating stone doors that emitted chaos. All of these strange phenomena and rumors originated from Windstream Valley. Everything was related to this place. This was the source of all the rumors. At this moment, White Treasure Mountain was no longer as peaceful as before. It was broken by the noise, and countless people quickly moved towards the depths of Windstream Valley. With such a commotion, it was impossible not to attract the attention of the spiritual beasts in the mountain. Hence, many battles broke out, and many people were killed by the spiritual beasts before they even reached Windstream Valley. As more and more bloodshed broke out, many people calmed down and began to hide their auras as they secretly moved closer to Windstream Valley. Therefore, the White Treasure Mountain, which had originally caused a huge commotion, suddenly became strangely quiet. However, Everyone knew that this was only the calm before the storm. A desperate battle was about to begin. After half a day of searching, the mountain range became much quieter. Su Yu and the others' faces became more serious. They were already deep into the White Treasure Mountain and close to the Windstream Valley. Spirit beasts ran amok here, and each of them was powerful. There were even many spirit beasts at the peak of the early stage of the 6th rank. Furthermore, if they were not careful, they would attract a group of spiritual beasts. At that time, even they would have to turn around and run. However, it was obvious that Su Yu often came to this mountain and was familiar with the terrain. Furthermore, she was a heaven-grade beginner-level mental energy master and had extremely strong mental energy senses. She was extremely sensitive to the powerful auras of the spiritual beasts. Usually, when there was a long distance between them, she would detect them in advance and lead the group to carefully go around them. Sometimes, even Qin Feng could not help but admire this woman. This was because even he found it difficult to detect the spiritual beasts that were extremely good at hiding. After all, compared to mental energy, there was still a huge gap between them. When it was almost dusk, Su Yu and the rest finally passed through a natural forest barrier and appeared outside a huge mountain. Let's go and find a place to stay first. Looking at the sky, I don't think there will be a fight tonight. Su Yu smiled. Qin Feng's gaze looked towards the valley. Indeed, he saw quite a number of tents. At that moment, he could not help but be somewhat astonished. He did not expect that so many people had already arrived at this place. It was much better than what he had imagined. The allure of this descendant spiritual beast was truly indescribable. The group quickened their pace. 10 minutes later, they appeared at the campsite in the valley. This campsite was clearly made up of many groups. Although they were all competitors, at the very least, they did not have to directly fall out with each other before they saw the surviving spirit beast. The appearance of the group from the Guanghan Hall had clearly attracted the attention of many people in the campsite. However, most of them had fearful gazes. The Guanghan Palace could be considered a first-rate force in Sin City, especially Su Yu, who was ranked second on the ambitious and ruthless person list. She was infamous for her ferocity, and ordinary forces wouldn't have the guts to provoke her. The people from the Hua family are also here. After entering the campsite, Su Yu and the rest suddenly looked towards a high ground not far away. There, some people were watching them. The Hua family's actions are quite fast. Looking in the direction of the Hua family, Ren Shi frowned and said, "Don't worry about them. Let's set up camp and rest first." Su Yu said indifferently. From her tone, it seemed that she did not care about these things. The rest of the people nodded and then ordered people to set up camp. "Hey, the people from the House of Bai are also here. This is great." Looking at a few young people on another high ground, Ren Shi-er's face lit up. When Qin Feng heard this, his gaze also turned over. He saw that there were a few young figures standing on the high ground. The one in the lead had a scholarly and handsome face. His face always contained a faint smile that easily gave people a kind of amiable feeling. When Su Yu, Ren Shi-er, and the rest looked over, the young man on the high ground also sensed it. After being slightly stunned, he suddenly nodded and revealed a kind smile. In response, Su Yu did not smile at him like she did with the whole family. She also smiled and nodded at him. "It seems that the House of Bai is your ally." Qin Feng smiled and said, "Not exactly an ally, but we have a common enemy." Su Yu smiled slightly. She said, "More than a year ago, the daughter of the House of Bai committed suicide. It seemed to be related to Su Ye's people, but they could not find any evidence. Later, they seemed to have discovered something. It's just that Su Yi has some connections with the Hua family. Moreover, the Hua family and the House of Bai have a business dispute. Su Ye's existence can restrict the House of Bai in some aspects. Therefore, with the Hua family keeping the House of Bai in check, there is nothing the House of Bai can do. After all, there is not enough evidence, so they can't suppress Su Yi with great fanfare. But the House of Bai has taken revenge on Su Yi. If there is a chance, they will definitely fight to the death." Su Yi said, "In fact, these are just connections of interest. Whether it is the Hua family, the house of Bai Guanghan Palace, or Suyi, they all take what they need. But in the face of real interests, these so-called connections are as fragile as paper. Qin Feng heard this and nodded slightly. He understood a little about this kind of connection of interests and each taking what they need. Rest early. I'm afraid that tomorrow's obstacle will not be easy. Now that the two remnant spirit beasts are trapped in the valley, the two main passages have been sealed. They can't leave. It was a quiet night. In this deep forest, being able to have so many people together made it seem a little safer. Although there were many beasts roaring in the middle of the night, overall, it was quite peaceful. When the morning of the second day arrived, the campsite was once again bustling with noise. However, there were quite a few people who were somewhat excited today. Evidently, they all knew that the two descendant spiritual beasts would appear today. Moreover, their ownership would also be decided today. Su Yi is here, someone exclaimed. Everyone looked towards the direction of the sound and saw several figures descending from the sky. The one in the lead was Su Yi. Behind him, there were two young figures standing. Both of them had the strength of the divine stage. The young master of the Yin sect is also here. In another direction, a group of people walked out of the forest and walked over. The fourth on the ambitious person ranking, Zhu Xia, is here. Diwu Jian has also appeared. The small mountain gate of the Mountain Gate sect has appeared. The lone cultivator, Lin Kuei, has also come. Voices that were filled with shock and dread rang out from time to time in this small valley. Every name clearly carried a great weight. Chapter 570. 3 students. The atmosphere in the mountain valley became increasingly tense as each and every famous expert appeared. Quite a few people looked at the experts that had appeared, with their eyes filled with fear. In front of a tent, the gazes of the people from the house of Bai slowly turned gloomy. This was especially so for the young man in the middle. The hatred in his eyes was practically undisguised as he stared at a young man not far away from Su Yi. It was Wu Sheng. At this moment, Wu Sheng also felt a biting cold gaze lock onto him. Immediately, he looked over. When he saw that person's ice-cold expression, he was so frightened that he trembled and hurriedly hid behind Su Yi. Humph! I want to see if Su Yi still has the energy to protect you today. The young man sneered. He slowly withdrew the killing intent in his eyes and no longer paid any attention to Su Yi. Brother Suya. Wu Sheng looked at Su Yi for help. It's fine. If he could kill you, he would have already done so. Today, no one here can casually attack you. Su Yi glanced at the young man and said with a faint smile. Hearing Su Ye's words, Wu Sheng seemed to have eaten a calming pill. The fear in his eyes disappeared without a trace. Zhou Ji's gaze swept back and forth across the crowd. A moment later, his moving gaze suddenly froze as the killing intent in his eyes uncontrollably gushed out. Back then, due to his carelessness, he had suffered a huge setback in front of Qin Feng. He had always regarded this as the greatest humiliation in his heart. He undoubtedly hated the latter to the extreme. Now that he saw this person, his gaze instantly turned dark and cold as he stared intently at the young figure seated on the mountain rock. Zhouji did not hide the killing intent in his eyes. Therefore, Qin Feng also felt his skin turn cold. He was a little stunned as he looked over. Finally, his gaze locked onto Zhouji, who was also standing beside Su Yi. Looking at that somewhat familiar face, his eyes narrowed, but he did not say anything. Qin Feng's disregard caused Zhouji to become even more furious. However, with Su Ye's reminder, he would not attack now. He only faced Qin Feng and slowly moved his mouth, silently saying, Your little life, I, Zhouji, will take it. Seeing this, Qin Feng faintly smiled. He was too lazy to pay attention to this fellow. He did not care about the grudges between them. If this person did not come looking for him, he would not do anything unnecessary. However, if the other party was stubborn, he did not mind letting him know the taste of death. Su Yi and the other experts appeared, but they did not immediately take action. This was because everyone here knew that the deeper one went into the White Treasure Mountain, the more serious the mysterious suppressive power would be. This was especially true in the Windstream Valley, where the suppressive power was several times stronger than other places. However, this suppressive power had a pattern. In the night, the suppressive power was especially strong. It was the strongest at midnight, and during the day, the suppressive power would be weakened. The time when the suppressive power was the weakest was noon. If one wanted to maintain their peak strength, they could only enter the valley when the suppressive power was the weakest. Qin Feng sat cross-legged on a huge boulder. His eyes were closed as he adjusted his state of mind. The other experts were also quietly waiting for the arrival of the final moment. However, many people's faces were filled with excitement and intense anticipation. Under their eager anticipation, time slowly flowed by. The sun in the sky gradually moved to the middle of the sky. Slightly blazing rays of light scattered down from the distant sky. However, there was not the slightest bit of warmth on the land. Figures stood up one after another, their gazes filled with anticipation as they looked towards the depths of the Windstream Valley. There were gales wreaking havoc there, but at this moment, the power of the gales had been reduced to a low point. Su Yi, and the rest looked in that direction, but did not take any action. Instead, they furrowed their brows, as if they were waiting for something. As the suppressive power grew weaker and weaker, some of the impatient people had already started to move towards that area. Under the lead of some people, more and more people started to move. Bang! However, just as some people were about to enter, the rumbling sound of rushing wind suddenly rang out from the distant horizon. The instant the sound of rushing wind rang out, Qin Feng's eyes suddenly opened. He could feel that the energy in this area was faintly showing signs of boiling. Taishan Academy. Qin Feng raised his head and looked towards the northern sky. There, a dazzling light was like a meteor streaking across the vast sky. The light broke through the sky and stirred up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The momentum was extremely terrifying. When the light appeared on the horizon, everyone in the campsite sensed it. Immediately, numerous surprised gazes were cast over. It's finally here. Su Yi, and the rest faces gradually became solemn. Under the curious gazes of many people, the light broke through the sky at an extremely fast speed. As it approached, everyone was surprised to find that the light was actually a long sword. It emitted a faint light and was quite mysterious. A heaven artifact. Some people's eyes suddenly burned with envy. Ordinary weapons could only be regarded as low-grade weapons, but a heaven artifact was different. It was something that could only be forged by the experts of the Forbidden Zone in the Ninth Heaven. It had infinite destructive power, especially for people of the Ninth Heaven realm. It was a great help. No one knew if Sin City had a heaven artifact of this level, but it was said that no one had ever used a heaven artifact. However, a heaven artifact had appeared. Obviously, there must be a super expert of the Forbidden Zone in the Ninth Heaven among the forces that own the heaven artifact. This kind of person had the power to destroy heaven and earth. Some of the covetous gazes were restrained. Even if they could snatch such a heaven artifact, they couldn't afford to enjoy it. Swoosh! When the light appeared in the sky and its speed slowed down, the crowd's gazes immediately focused on the treasure artifact. There was a figure dressed in black robes, standing there with his hands behind his back. A gentle breeze brushed past, causing his long hair to flutter. He appeared extremely free and at ease. His temperament caused many people to be impressed. On the heaven artifact, the black-robed man lowered his head slightly. His calm eyes swept across the camp below, and then he smiled gently. Swoosh! After the man appeared, 2 more rays of light shot out. When they saw the 2 rays of light clearly, everyone's jaws dropped. It was actually another 2 heaven artifacts. Heavens! Just what kind of power was this? How could 3 prized artifacts appear at once? Many of them didn't know that the students of Taishan Academy had also come, so they were very shocked. On one of the heaven artifacts stood a young girl. The girl's face was exquisite and flawless. Her body emitted a noble aura, which made many people's eyes burn. However, the disdain and a trace of contempt on her face made the fire dissipate. On the other heaven artifact, there was also a beautiful figure. The girl was wearing a light purple dress. Her eyebrows were like emerald feathers, her skin was white like snow, and her waist was like a girdle. Her cheeks were covered by a veil, and her clear eyes were overshadowed by the world. Such a girl had such a stunning temperament. Although the lady's face was covered by a veil, the faintly discernible outline of her face revealed the nearly perfect curve of her face, causing one to wish that they could tear off the veil and see the beauty that could make 100 flowers pale in comparison. What a beautiful girl! Qin Feng's gaze stared at the purple-dressed lady who was standing on the heaven weapon. He could not help but inhale a breath of air in his heart. It was not that he had never seen a peerless beauty before. However, the kind of special temperament that could make people unable to forget after seeing it was very rare. And this girl was one of them. Chapter 571. Confrontation. The entire somewhat noisy wine stream valley had also become quiet at this moment. Numerous pairs of eyes were shocked and fearful as they stared at the three young men standing on their swords in the sky. For a time, they were unable to figure out the origins of these people. However, there was no secret in this world, and soon news spread that these people were students from the Imperial Mystery Academy. After pondering for a moment, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Coupled with a treasure like a heaven weapon, it seemed that only a transcendent academy would have such a heaven-defying method. Immediately, many people's gazes became complicated. There was shock, envy, fear, and a trace of excitement in their eyes. Those who could survive in Sin City were not ordinary people, especially those famous experts. They all had their own pride, and they wanted to see how amazing the students from the Imperial Mystery Academy were. Therefore, after being shocked, many people's gazes became somewhat playful. Undercurrents were surging. Qin Feng, who was nearby, could naturally feel the changes in the surrounding people. He could not help but laugh gloatingly in his heart. It seemed that before entering the valley, there would be a good show to watch. With the arrival of these people, the noisy valley gradually quieted down. Pairs of eyes with various emotions stared at the three figures standing on swords in the sky. Some people were shocked, some were envious, some were fearful, and some even had a trace of provocation. They wanted to see how the students from the Imperial Mystery Academy were compared to them. These people had their own pride and naturally did not think that they were inferior to them, especially Su Yi, and a few other famous people. The young man, standing on the swords, naturally noticed the changes in the gazes of the people below. His face was calm, but his brows were slightly furrowed. Although he was not afraid of these people, if so many people joined forces to deal with them, even a few of them would have to retreat miserably. After all, there were some powers that he could not display in this place. This time, they were mainly here for the remnant spiritual beasts. If these people had the intention to join forces to obstruct them, they might have to return empty-handed. Moreover, before coming, Old Gu had reminded him that there was no need to have any conflict with the people here. There was no benefit for them to fight to the death with these people who did not care about their lives. However, although he thought this way, there were others who did not. When she sensed the provocative gazes below, the face of the young lady, who had always been treated like a moon surrounded by stars, turned cold. Soon after, her merciless words with a commanding tone gently spread out in the valley. We were the first to discover the remnant spiritual beast. You people who have nothing to do with us should quickly retreat. Do not disturb us. Before the young man could stop her, the young lady's voice quickly spread out. He frowned and saw that the faces of many people below had indeed turned gloomy. The students of the Imperial Mystery Academy are indeed as arrogant as the rumors say. While the crowd, the academy, the young lady, the academy was academy, the Imperial Mystery Academy, the academy, the academy, the Imperial Mystery Academy. Su Yu is of the academy. Su of the of course. Su Yu, who was standing to the side, also smiled faintly. Her words showed that she was not very fond of those people. Arrogance also needs to be backed up by strength. Otherwise, it would just be playing to the gallery. Sui also smiled faintly. His handsome face did not change at all. These people are very strong, but they are not invincible. The lone cultivator, Lin Kuei, said expressionlessly. Hee, who do you think you are? The Hua family's expert in the distance sneered. Want to show off? Ha! You have come to the wrong place. Where did this silly girl come from? Sin City is not a place for you to behave atrociously. Get lost. Don't think that you can look down on everyone just because you are a student of the Imperial Mystery Academy. This is not a place for you to show off. Although the Imperial Mystery Academy is strong, it is not a place that can control everything. Some people's sarcasm was quite subtle, while some people with fiery tempers were merciless. Strong spiritual chi wrapped in a cold and playful sneer, which reverberated in the valley from time to time. Listening to the mocking voices, the young lady, Tan Tan, was livid. Her beautiful eyes were burning with anger. She choked and pulled out her long sword. Pointing at the group of people below, she shouted angrily, "You frogs at the bottom of the well dare to question me?" Looking at the young girl who had flown into a rage out of humiliation, Qin Feng sneered and shook his head. This woman really couldn't see the current situation clearly. Or was she used to being arrogant in Imperial Mystery Academy? Didn't she know that here were all fugitives who lived a life of danger? Who would care about her threats? Tan Tan, the young man, Yi Hong, frowned and said, "Yi Hong, don't bother. If I don't teach them a lesson today, what kind of Imperial Mystery Academy is this?" Tan Tan's face turned green with anger as she glared at the group of people below. "Haha, teach us a lesson? You think you're worthy?" With a loud shout, a figure suddenly shot out from below. It was the burly man with the iron staff who had ridiculed them earlier. He rushed towards Tan Tan with a grin on his face, and the iron staff in his hand whistled through the air as it smashed towards the ladder. Facing the powerful blow of the burly man, Tan Tan's expression did not change. She quickly waved her long sword, and the tip of the sword flashed. The long sword formed a strange pattern, and then the pattern expanded in the wind. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a golden light curtain about 10 feet in size. In the light curtain, golden light flickered, releasing a considerable sense of power. At the same time, the burly man's iron staff also smashed into the golden light curtain. Buzz! The iron staff fell silently, and the golden light curtain rippled violently. The ripples spread to the entire light curtain, and the light curtain also shook violently, but it did not break. The golden light curtain was like a rubber ball filled with air, extremely elastic. After a moment of silence, the dented light curtain suddenly bounced back and sent the burly man flying. Staggering back a few steps in the air, the burly man's expression became serious as he stared at the golden light curtain. Looking at this scene, many people opened their mouths in shock. They naturally knew of Zhang Shan's strength, who wielded an iron staff and was known for his strength. He was in the divine realm and ranked 11th on the list of ambitious people. However, even with his fierce strength, he could not even break through the opponent's defense with one blow. In particular, it could be seen how amazing the defensive power of this golden light curtain was. Although everyone was unhappy with Tan Tan's arrogant attitude, they could not deny that this woman did have some skills, as expected of a student from Taishan Academy. Seeing this scene, Suyin smiled softly and shook his head. But I'm afraid that this alone is not enough. As soon as he finished speaking, another figure soared into the sky. "Brother Zheng, let me help you." As the cold voice fell, a giant axe fiercely chopped at the golden light curtain. However, the result was not unexpected. The golden light curtain shook for a moment, but still did not break. "You country bumpkins want to break through my defense? How laughable." Looking at the two people who were in a sorry state, Tan Tan sneered. With the defensive technique that her teacher had taught her, if she used it with all her strength, even an expert one level higher than her would not be able to break it in a short period of time, let alone an expert of the same level as her. Tan's words were like a loud slap on the faces of everyone. The burning heat quickly spread to their eyes, and many people's eyes turned scarlet at this time. Chapter 572. Everyone tried. A gentle-looking young man with a long sword on his back walked out with a smile. He looked at Tan and said, "Everyone, don't be sad. Compared to the identity of Taishan Academy's students, people like us who rely on our own efforts naturally can't compare to them. A defensive combat technique that is not weak in the heaven rank. It's really a big deal." Looking at the golden light screen, the young man's face was blazing with fighting spirit. "I like to see if your defense is stronger or if my sword is more amazing." At the end of his words, a shocking sword rose from the young man's body and slowly spread out like a sharp blade. Number 5 on the list of formidable people, Bo Jian. Some people's eyes narrowed and were filled with excitement and passion. The previous defeat had made them feel slightly ashamed, and they had to break this light screen to regain some face. Bo Jian's strength was tyrannical, and it was very likely that he had broken into the second heaven stage. Moreover, his battle record was far superior to those of the same stage, and was not something that the previous 2 people could compare to. Bo Jian did not fly up into the sky. He just stood below with his head raised and slowly pulled out the rusty long sword on his back. As the long sword was pulled out, the sharp sword around him instantly converged toward the long sword. Bo Jian's casual eyes became incomparably sharp at this time. The long sword in his hand slowly trembled, and an extremely amazing power spread out, attracting the attention of everyone. The tip of the sword bloomed with light, and with the infusion of spiritual power, the light became more and more dazzling. When the spiritual power gathered to a certain extent, Bo Jian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and the long sword suddenly pierced forward. Killing sword. Swoosh! As the light shout fell, a dazzling sword light instantly tore through the air and shot toward the golden light screen. It left a shallow white mark in the air. The sword light flashed and blasted on the golden light screen. In an instant, the light screen trembled violently, and waves of ripples spread wildly from the point of contact between the sword light and the light screen. On the violently trembling light screen, the golden light quickly surged and converged toward the sword light, trying to suppress the sharp sword light. Under the suppression of more and more golden light, the vibrations of the sword light were indeed suppressed. It wriggled slightly and stopped on the light screen, seemingly unable to advance any further. Looking at this scene, the crowd couldn't help but shake their heads in disappointment. Their eyes were filled with regret. The students of the Imperial Mystery Academy were really not simple. Even Bo Jian couldn't deal with them. Tan also breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that the sword light had been suppressed. Immediately, there was some disdain in her eyes as she looked at Bo Jian. She softly snorted and said, "Humph, you're only a so-so." However, Bo Jian only smiled strangely at her mockery. His hands quickly formed seals. Looking at this scene, Qin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. This was because at this moment, he acutely sensed that the energy in the sword light that had calmed down had suddenly become violent. This fellow is indeed terrifying. Qin Feng thought to himself. To be able to control the attack he released, such a method was indeed unexpected. Tan also saw Bo Jian's actions, but before she could mock him, she saw Bo Jian give her a strange smile, and the seal in his hand suddenly stopped. Explode. Boom! The golden light screen, which had calmed down, suddenly began to vibrate. The vibrations gradually became faster and faster, and the frequency became faster and faster. When it reached a certain level, there was a loud explosion, and the sword light directly exploded at the center of the golden light screen. A sound like muffled thunder resounded through the valley. At this moment, the golden light was wanton, and the spiritual energy erupted. Light scattered all over the sky, and the golden light curtain exploded in front of everyone's shocked eyes. Under the violent explosion, everyone stared blankly at the area where the spirit force and light raged. Even Zhongshan and the other two powerhouses on the ambitious person list were helpless against the golden light curtain, but it had exploded just like that. A cool breeze blew, blowing away the light. At this moment, the golden light curtain had disappeared, and the sharp sword light had also dissipated. There was nothing in the sky. Wow! The valley was silent for a moment, and suddenly, there was an earth-shattering cheer. Many people looked in awe at the figure carrying a long sword in front of them. It was this person who had redeemed the reputation of Sin City. This had greatly boosted their morale. Number 5 on the list of formidable men, Bu Jian. He really lives up to his reputation. Everyone cheered. Tan was also stunned when she saw this scene. Only when the earth-shaking cheers rushed into her ears did she regain her senses. Immediately, her pretty face became incomparably green. Hee, little girl, remember next time, don't order anyone here. You're not qualified to do so. Just as Tan was extremely angry, Zhongshan and the other man quickly flashed over when the light curtain exploded. With a sinister smile, they launched a tyrannical attack. However, before the attack landed, a pink flame torrent swept over and swept the two powerful attacks back the way they came. Wherever the flame torrent swept, the air seemed to boil, and a powerful and terrifying temperature exploded. The sudden situation caused Zhongshan and the other man's faces to change drastically. They frantically activated the spiritual energy in their bodies, forming a layer of defense on the surface of their bodies. Whoosh! However, after the flame torrent swept over, the two men's defense was as fragile as paper. The flame torrent streaked across the sky, and the two figures, whose bodies were emitting green smoke, fell back under the shocked gazes of the crowd. Motherf asterisk Kerr. Sensing that Zhongshan and the other man's aura had weakened, the people from Sin City were furious. In the previous battle, everyone stopped when it was appropriate. However, this time, the other party had directly injured two of them. This was unacceptable to the crowd, and they all cursed. However, after witnessing the terror of the flame torrent, no one dared to rush forward. After all, it was too shocking to be able to injure two heavenly stage powerhouses so easily. Since you want to fight as a group, we will accompany you. However, Sin City was not without capable people. Immediately, a powerhouse with considerable strength took action. Fierce spiritual energy violently shot toward the owner of the flame torrent. In response, the masked woman's face was calm. With a wave of her hand, the flame torrent swept out again, turning into a fire dragon that was several feet long. The fire dragon swung its tail and fiercely swung it toward the powerhouses. Bang! 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 After a few blows, the fire dragon's color became much fainter. However, the powerhouses who attacked were also forced to retreat by several feet. Their eyes were filled with anger and a trace of horror as they stared at the fire dragon. Then, they looked at the masked woman in the distance with a deep sense of fear in their eyes. Hee, let's play as well. The young master of the Een sect and the lone cultivator of the Mountain Gate sect, Lin Kuei, sneered. Their figures rose from the ground and shot toward the masked woman. The masked woman's cold and indifferent face rippled as she saw these three people rushing towards her. She waved her white hand, and the fiery dragon flew backwards. It then transformed into a small fiery red dragon and started to hover above her palm. The fire dragon only stayed in the woman's palm for a moment before it rushed out again. The fire dragon's body suddenly emitted a pink light. As the light bloomed, the miniature fire dragon's body began to expand rapidly like an inflated balloon. In front of countless shocked gazes, the miniature fire dragon, which was originally only a few inches long, turned into a behemoth with a body length of several hundred feet in just a moment. The fire dragon, which was surrounded by pink flames, floated in the air. As its body grew bigger, a powerful energy slowly overflowed from the fire dragon's body, causing the surrounding space to ripple like water. The temperature of the surrounding area was also rising rapidly. The huge dragon lingered in the sky. Its enormous body caused everyone below to be stunned. Even Lin Kuei and the rest were a little stunned. They did not expect that the mini pocket-sized thing could actually transform into such an extremely eye-piercing appearance. Moreover, everyone could feel that it did not seem to be formed by flames. It was almost solid. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, many people would have believed that it was a dragon that was bathed in flames. It was not the same as before, but several feet. Lin Kuei, the young master of the Yin sect, and the few people of the Mountain Gate sect looked at each other with grave expressions. Then they no longer held back and released all the spiritual energy in their bodies. Although the fire dragon looked extraordinary, it was only formed by flames. It was not a real dragon, so they did not have any means to deal with it. Chapter 573. Lineup. Everyone was shocked. This masked woman was too arrogant. She actually planned to take on 3 people at once. If it was a one-on-one, Lin Kuei and the other 2 were no match for her. However, it was a little too much for her to take on 3 people at once. Sin City did not only have those powerhouses on the list of formidable men. Some of them came from different forces, while others did not participate in the list of formidable men due to other reasons. Among Lin Kuei and the other 2 of them came from different forces, while one of them was a lone cultivator. Lin Kuei's small mountain gate was surrounded by the fire dragons. Although the insect's young master and the others appeared to be in a sorry state with smoke rising from their bodies, the fire dragons weren't in a good condition either. Under the fierce attacks of the 3, their bodies were constantly shrinking. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before the fire dragons dissipated. Yihong looked at this scene and frowned slightly. He wanted to help the woman, but before he could do so, 2 sharp gusts of wind rushed towards him. If you want to play, let us accompany you. The second on the list of formidable men, Su Yu, and the third on the list of formidable men, Su Yi, have also joined the fight. Seeing the 2 figures rushing towards Yihong, everyone in the valley burst into cheers. Their eyes were filled with deep reverence. These 2 people were extremely famous in Sin City. Among the younger generation, they were almost invincible. Even Lin Kuei, the Yin sect's young master, and the other disciple from the Mountain Gate sect were slightly weaker than them. Looking at the 2 people who had fought with him before, Yihong's frown deepened. He knew that these 2 people were powerful, but it seemed like there was no room for negotiation. Su Su's figure rushed up into the sky and punched towards Yihong. Purple spiritual energy swept out, and the spiritual energy current turned into a wild tiger. It was like a fierce tiger descending from the mountain. It carried a terrifying power as it whizzed towards Yihong. Between Su Yu's eyebrows, there was a rune squirming, and a strange fluctuation was emitted. Endless spiritual power rushed out from the top of her head. The spiritual power took shape, and a thick and blunt broadsword was condensed. Then, it raged towards Yihong. The 2 extremely powerful attacks caused the energy in the sky to show signs of going berserk. Yihong's eyes narrowed. Soon after, he lightly inhaled a breath of air, stretched out his arms, and spread out his hands. This person, Qin Feng's gaze stared intently at the youth standing on the sword. Soon after, his eyes hardened. There seemed to be specks of spiritual light flashing on the latter's palm, while an extremely obscure and unique fluctuation was being emitted. Others might not be able to sense this feeling, but he could clearly sense it because it was similar to the fluctuations of a spirit array set up with spiritual power. However, there were no fluctuations of mental power in it at all. It was a special thing that was different from spiritual power, mental power, and physical power. It's a magic array. Looks like this kid is quite interesting, Mo Yin suddenly said. Magic array? Qin Feng asked. The spirit array is only one of the many attacking methods of a spirit master. Compared to a real array, there is still a huge gap. Mo Yin shook his head and said, "You don't have to pay attention to this now. When you are strong enough in the future, I will explain it to you in detail." Hearing this, Qin Feng nodded slightly. Boom! The tiger and blade finally fiercely slammed into Yi Hong's palms under countless gazes. However, the scene that everyone imagined did not happen. The tiger and blade collided with Yi Hong's palms, and the latter was indeed pushed back. Moreover, under the attack of the two, he was continuously pushed back. However, the tiger and blade could only enter the range of his palms and could not advance any further. Moreover, everyone could clearly see that as Yi Hong was pushed back, the tiger condensed from spiritual power and the blade formed from mental power were fading at a speed visible to the naked eye. When Yi Hong was blasted back 100 feet, the ferocious tiger and broadsword were finally exhausted and dissipated. When they saw this scene, the entire mountain valley turned silent. Some of the noise also disappeared. Pairs of incomparably fearful eyes stared at Yi Hong, who had retreated 100 feet, yet still remained calm and collected. Their hearts involuntarily twitched for a moment. This guy was too abnormal. Under the joint attack of Su Yu and Su Yi, he was actually only at a disadvantage and not defeated. Su Yu and Su Ye's faces were also gloomy. They were quite surprised by such a result. This guy seemed to be stronger than they had imagined. Qin Feng narrowed his eyes. Others might not be able to see it, but with Mo Yan's secret reminder, he could find some clues. The magic array in Yi Hong's palms seemed to have the power to disintegrate. As for Su Yu and Su Ye's attacks, they were not truly blocked by him. Instead, the majority of their attacks were broken down by him. On the other side, with the participation of the Hua family's experts, Hu Yuan, Lin Kuei, the Little Mountain Gate, and the Yin Sect's young master formed a 4-on-1 situation. The fire dragon was showing signs of being suppressed. Qin Feng looked over, and his eyes narrowed. Immediately, he secretly formed the fire god art. Between heaven and earth, fire elements that were difficult to be seen with the naked eye were added to the fire dragon. Suddenly, the fire dragon's power increased greatly, and in turn, suppressed Lin Kuei and the others. What's going on? All the experts were puzzled. Lin Kuei and the others clearly had the upper hand, so why did they suddenly fall into a disadvantage? Even the masked woman controlling the fire dragon was a little confused. Her own people knew what was going on, and the unstable elements inside the fire dragon seemed to have been eliminated. Qin Feng stopped at the right time. The masked woman reminded him of Gong Xiaoxi. When the latter officially met for the first time, she was also masked. He could not help but want to help. Moreover, this woman was very strong and did not seem to be weaker than the youth. However, there seemed to be an accident in her fire dragon, and the fusion was not complete, making it difficult to control. In other words, she was using her weakness against the enemy's strength. He only used the fire god art to temporarily eliminate this situation. Moreover, Qin Feng has own plans. Su Yu had allied with them, but it did not mean that he had joined them. These students were indeed troublesome, but it was precisely because of this that the experts in Sin City did not have the heart to care about them. If he really forced the three of them to retreat, he was afraid that some people would notice him, and that would be troublesome. Since that was the case, he might as well let the two sides maintain a balance and let them be wary of each other. This way, he would have an opening to exploit. Chapter 574. Ability. The atmosphere in the valley was quite tense. Both sides were confronting each other, and there was a faint sense of mutual hostility. I'm afraid that it won't go as you wish if you want to throw your weight around here. We may not be a match for you in a one-on-one battle, but don't forget where you are. There may be many people outside who are afraid of your identity, but here, no one will care about you. So you glanced at them and said indifferently, "That's right. Here, no one will be so noble as to fight you one-on-one. We're more used to ganging up on our opponents." Su Yi smiled and his tone became even more vicious. "If you retreat now, we can let go. But if you're still stubborn, we don't mind leaving all of you here. If the forces behind you come for revenge, we'll just run away. I don't believe that your forces can spread across the entire continent. Moreover, Sin City isn't as simple as it seems on the surface. There's a reason why the other countries don't interfere. Brothers of Sin City, we are all hot-blooded men. Are we going to let them bully us? This matter has already spread. Won't we be mocked for being spineless? Tell me, do we fight and offend that colossus? Or do we hide in Sin City like a tortoise? Let others poke at our backs and call us cowards. Tell me, what do you choose? Suyi glared at them. He shouted sternly, "Fight, damn it! We've never provoked the Imperial Mystery Academy. I didn't expect them to send people to our territory and ask us to obey them. We can't stand it." A group of people suddenly shouted with righteous indignation. Looking at the reactions of the people below, the corners of Su Ye's mouth gradually curled up. Su Ye frowned and glanced at Su Yi. His words did not leave any leeway for the other party. If they refused to back down, a battle would be unavoidable. Although she did not want to do this, if she objected, she would be standing on the opposite side of Sin City. Therefore, even if she was dissatisfied, she could not say anything. This guy is really good at bewitching people. Qin Feng sighed. Su Ye's words had united the entire Sin City, and anyone who spoke against it would be isolated by the others. Looking at the spirited crowd, Tan Tan's cheeks turned red with anger. Her beautiful eyes were burning with anger. Although the masked woman frowned, she quickly recovered and her face was cold and indifferent. It was as if what had happened had nothing to do with her. Yi Hong smiled faintly and cupped his fist to the crowd of Sin City. Everyone is too excited. We came here for the ancient remnant. Such a rare, spiritual beast. Tan Tan's words just now were a bit too extreme. I hope everyone doesn't take it to heart. Listening to Yi Hong's words, which showed signs of yielding, the people from Sin City fell silent and did not say anything. We will be seriously injured, and then others will reap the benefits. Is this what everyone wants to see? Hearing this, many people's eyes lit up. Indeed, their goal was the ancient remnant. There was no need to fight to the death in this situation. It was better to preserve their strength. Moreover, the other party had already made a concession. There was no need for them to be aggressive. That's good. The ancient remnant spiritual beast is obtained by those who are capable. It's not about who gets it first. Suyu also smiled gently and said, with Suyu taking the lead, many people's attitudes improved. As long as it didn't touch their fundamental interests, they didn't mind a few forces getting involved. Most people nodded in agreement. Looking at this scene, Suyi frowned slightly. He didn't expect the people of Imperial Mystery Academy to be so easy to talk to. But the matter had already calmed down, and he couldn't say anything. After all, most people came for the ancient remnant spiritual beast. The other party had already taken a step back. If he continued to push his luck, people would say that he was disgusted. Looking at Su Ye's expression, Suyu secretly smiled. It seemed that Qin Feng was right. This guy really wanted to use Yi Hong and the others to exhaust their strength. In the end, he wanted to be the fisherman. But fortunately, he didn't succeed. After the dispute had calmed down, everyone's attention was once again attracted by the ancient remnant spiritual beast. After calming down the anger of the people in Sin City, Yi Hong smiled faintly. He didn't want to start a feud with the people here. He knew very well what kind of people they were. It was just that Tan Tan was too arrogant. Before he could remind her, she had already offended the other party. Yi Hong could only accept this helplessly. Although he could settle this dispute in advance, the effect wouldn't be as good as now. After all, any words without absolute strength had no weight. The strength that the few of them had displayed had probably intimidated many people. If they were to say these words now, they would naturally agree. Furthermore, they would also be extremely fearful of the few of them. When the time came to compete for the archaic remains, they would also have many misgivings and would not dare to casually make a move against them. Of course, he didn't do this solely because of these considerations. He also had his own plans. He was an arrogant person and had the belief that he was invincible among his peers. Naturally, he also wanted to measure the strength of these ruthless and ambitious people in Sin City. After this round of consideration, he attached more importance to these people in his heart, especially Su Yu and Su Yi. If it wasn't for his miraculous methods, he would have been in a difficult situation if he received their full strength attacks. These people are indeed not weak. Yihong murmured softly. Suddenly, he saw Tan Tan's angry face. He shook his head helplessly and said with a gentle voice, "Junior sister, you were too impulsive just now. I know, but I just can't stand the arrogance of these people." Tan Tan said with dissatisfaction. Hearing this, Yihong bitterly smiled. He naturally knew his junior sister's temperament. He didn't say anything and extended his hand and patted the latter's head. Then, he looked at the masked woman with a dignified expression and said, "Qiu Yun, how is it?" Qiu Yun's expression was still cold. She slightly nodded and said softly, "That man and woman are very strong. As for the others, as long as they don't join hands, it won't be difficult to deal with them." Speaking until here, Qiu Yun paused for a moment and said in a low voice, "There seems to be a capable person among them." "What capable person?" Yihong was stunned. For Qiu Yun to address that person in such a manner, there must be an extraordinary ability. Chapter 575. Revealing his identity. Yihong was surprised. Even you couldn't detect his aura when he attacked. Qiu Yun nodded. "I'm curious. Since he's from Sin City, why did he help me?" Yihong's gaze deepened. It seems that Sin City is full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. No wonder the elders in the Institute reminded us not to be too flamboyant in Sin City. This is the divine capital, where we must keep a low profile. He looked at the depths of the valley. There were weeds and rocks everywhere. Although it was noon and the sun was shining down, it was still very dim and made people feel a little depressed. "Be careful when the time comes," Yihong instructed. He raised his head and looked at the sun that was about to reach its peak. His eyes narrowed, and no one knew what he was thinking. On the other side, Xue Wuchang sighed when he saw that the situation had calmed down. He looked around and suddenly paused in the direction of the Guanghan Palace. Then his face suddenly turned cold. Qin Feng, who was in the crowd, was also attracted to the depths of the valley. Suddenly, he felt something and raised his head. Then, he saw Xue Wuchang, who was staring at him coldly. Qin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He was expressionless as he looked at Xue Wuchang coldly. "Haha, I didn't expect you to have the guts to come here." Xue Wuchang took a step forward and blood-red spiritual energy rolled out. His voice was very loud. So many people present heard him. Immediately, many people stared at Xue Wuchang in confusion. Following his gaze, everyone's gaze landed on a young man in the group of women from the Guanghan Palace. Most of the people here had never seen Qin Feng before. Therefore, they were curious. However, from Xue Wuchang's words, it seemed that there was some conflict between the two of them. Some people's hearts shook after thinking about it. It seemed that there was only one person who could make Xue Wuchang's murderous intent so strong. Is he the young man who set the blood-refining gate on fire and kidnapped the greenscale monster? Someone asked. Instantly, it caused a chain reaction. Countless people stared at Qin Feng with burning eyes. Under their gazes, they soon discovered the figure of the explosion. They were even more certain of Qin Feng's identity. He was the culprit who had set the blood refinement sect on fire. Qin Feng indifferently stared at Xue Wuchang for a while, then withdrew his gaze and ignored him. Now was a special time, and there was no need to be too entangled with him at this time. However, Xue Wuchang didn't think the same. The spiritual energy around him became more and more terrifying, and the smell of blood filled the air. Most of them hadn't seen Qin Feng yet, so they were waiting to watch a good show. However, some people were different, such as Wushang. He smiled at Qin Feng viciously. He was happy to see such a situation. Zhou Ji was expressionless, but he was a little dissatisfied. Qin Feng was his target, and he wanted to kill him with his own hands. He didn't want others to do it for him. "Kid, it's time to settle the grudge between us." As he spoke, Xue Wuchang suddenly pointed his finger, and a bloody light swooped down on Qin Feng. Qin Feng was about to block it, but a beautiful figure suddenly blocked in front of him. Suyu waved her hand, and a spiritual energy swept out, scattering the bloody light. At the same time, her cold voice sounded with a hint of warning. I don't know what grudges you have, but now that the Greenscale monster has joined the Guanghan Palace, and Qin Feng is also a guest of the Guanghan Palace, don't blame me for not showing mercy if you attack him. Suyu, you're too overbearing. Shui Wucheng coldly snorted. Since the Greenscale monster has joined the Guanghan Palace, I naturally won't ask more. However, this person has a blood feud with the Blood Refinement sect. I'm seeking revenge on him because of a personal grudge. He is not a member of the Guanghan Palace, so why are you meddling in other people's business? Do you really think that Sin City is your world? The Blood Refinement sect was close to Su Yi, so they were not too afraid of Suyu. Zhou smiled as he watched this scene. When he received Su Ye's gaze, he was slightly taken aback. He immediately understood that the reason why they didn't start fighting with the people of Taishan Academy was because they wanted to shift the focus to Guanghan Palace. Zhou Ji took a step forward and smiled. Yes, the Guanghan Palace doesn't seem to have the right to meddle in other people's business. Moreover, I have some grudges with this kid, so I need to settle them. Haha, Qin Feng, you have a lot of opponents. At this time, Suyi chuckled softly and said, although you killed Su Li, and I should avenge him, if you can't even pass this hurdle, I really can't lower myself to deal with you. Su Ye's words were like a bomb that stunned everyone. This guy actually had such a big grudge against Su Yi. Yes, some time ago, Su Ye's younger brother Su Li was indeed killed in the unfolding mountain range. I didn't expect it to be this guy. Isn't that a little too daring? He still dares to come to Sin City and set fire to the Blood Refinement sect, offending Zhou Ji. Many people were speechless. This was a troublemaker, setting fire to the Blood Refinement sect, offending the potential list Wu Sheng, and having a grudge with Zhou Ji, who was ranked 8th on the ambitious person list. He also had a grudge with Su Yi, who was ranked 3rd. Even so, he still dared to appear here openly. Did he think that with the support of the Guanghan Palace, he could do whatever he wanted? Moreover, everyone also analyzed the intention of Su Yi to throw such a bomb. Those who had a grudge against this person should quickly take revenge. If Su Yi wanted to make a move, he would stop her. Su Yi's pretty face was also stunned. She had calculated everything, but she did not expect that there was such a big grudge between Qin Feng and Su Yi. This was going to be difficult. No wonder he said those words. Only now did she remember what Su Yi said to Qin Feng that night. Looking at Qin Feng, Su Yi could not help but roll her eyes. Brat, you've really screwed me over. Su Yi and Qin Feng had such a big grudge. If she wanted to stop him, she would not be justified. Then you should stop. I'll deal with it myself. Qin Feng said softly. He did not mean to blame her. After all, Su Yi wanted to take revenge. Su Yi, who was only in a cooperative relationship with him, had no reason to continue helping him. In the face of benefits, this kind of cooperative relationship could not withstand any wind or rain. This was human nature. Su Yi's eyes flashed. Now that things had developed to this point, it was really difficult for her to deal with it. After all, she had a group of sisters behind her. She had to think about the Guanghan Palace. After a moment, she sighed. Her eyes suddenly became sharp as she said loudly, I don't care what kind of grudge you have with Qin Feng. I won't care what you do after leaving the Guanghan Palace. However, when he is a guest of the Guanghan Palace, those who seek revenge against him will be declaring war against the Guanghan Palace. Su Yu's words caused an uproar. No one expected that Su Yu would protect a man like this. This was the first time in history. Qin Feng was also somewhat stunned as he looked at the figure blocking in front of him. The iciness on his face eased a little. He did not expect that Su Yu would not hesitate to offend so many people in order to protect him, even though he and Su Yu only had a cooperative relationship. One could imagine the pressure she was under. This favor was not small. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.